All right, good evening, everyone. I'll now call the committee of the whole meeting to order at 4:59 p.m. Land acknowledgement statement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, the culture of the Shinnebec, the people of the three fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and give further thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all as treaty people live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Read the agenda. The agenda be approved as presented. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Scholais, Councillor Winters. Discussion. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. For declaration of pecuniary interest, does any member have any declaration of pecuniary interest? If so, you can also declare at any time. I'm not seeing any. Announcements. Does any member wish to make an announcement? Looks quiet there too. All right. Public hearings. At the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole be recessed to hold a public hearing for zoning bylaw amendment Z0724 for 203-6595 Ontario Inc. Stephen Barclay. I need a mover and a second. Councillor Winters, Councillor Day. Discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, so for DEV 20234-058 Z07-24 Barclay Public Meeting Report. This meeting has been called to consider zoning bylaw amendment application Z0724 for property legally described as Range Callboys PT Lot 43 RP 16R70 Part 12. Madam Clerk, please advise the method by which notice of this public meeting was given.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property, by email to all the prescribed bodies on September 23rd, 2024, posted at the subject property and posted on the Township of Georgian Bluffs website. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgian Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the local planning appeal tribunal. The person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The planner proceed with the application. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Application Z0724 proposes to rezone lands currently zoned as planned development and environmental protection to a site-specific shoreline residential zone and an environmental protection zone to allow for the construction of the cottage and ancillary uses. It should be noted the environmental protection zone will remain unchanged. It should also be noted that the existing lot is accessed via a private laneway located along the rear of subject lands. No direct vehicular access off Prairie Road 1 is proposed at this time. In terms of comments received, comments so far have been received from Saugeen Ojibwe Nation Archaeological Department. They require an archaeological assessment for this property, and they've asked that the proponent reach out to Son directly for the next steps associated with that. We did not receive any written comments from the Conservation Authority. They've requested more time to provide fulsome comments on the proposal. And we have very recently received written comments from the County of Grey Planning and Development Services Department that were received after the publication of the planning report, so they didn't make it onto that report. But if you would like, I can summarize those comments from the county. They basically say that in summary, Grey County planning staff cannot support the proposed rezoning application at this time. They have significant concerns that the historic Big Bay Estate lots were created without a formal comprehensive planning process And as such, some of the more basic elements of planning regarding servicing, stormwater, safe access, viable building envelopes, ecological considerations, and traffic impacts, etc., were not demonstrated. County staff would recommend at a minimum that these elements be formally reviewed and conceptually demonstrated at the individual lot level for the Barclay development. And any studies should be undertaken by qualified professionals, including registered engineers, ecologists, planners, etc. Alternatively, and as the county prefers, the existing owners of individual lots in that area may collaborate to undertake a more comprehensive plan review on a more fulsome level that looks at more than just the Barclay application, but all the lots in the vicinity. They also note that that the county staff would ultimately defer to the township for a detailed review of this matter, and they're certainly open to further discussion with the applicant and the township and the conservation authority to better understand the development of his lot, the individual lot, and adjacent lots. To date, those are all the comments received.
Thank you, Michael, for that. No member of the public registered with the clerk to provide comments in support or in opposition of the applicant, but the applicant, Stephen Barclay, has registered. Stephen, welcome, and would you like to provide some comments?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for taking the time to review this. Yeah, so this is something that Grey County and Campbell Township agreed was going to happen back in 1972. Apparently the developers ran out of money, and here we are today. I'm through, I think this is my fourth planner. The lots are all well, the one in question is an 1.5 acre lot. They're basically letting 3 to 1 go along the shoreline. So they're, they're packing them along the shoreline, and I've got an 1.5 acre lot high and dry. Andy Sorensen, Mac have already been up there. Andy's retired now. The report from him said it was so stable they could reduce the setbacks. It's a 400 million year old piece of rock. It's not going anywhere. The county, Grey County's concerns, again, were just regurgitated stuff that they've been regurgitating for decades. If one of the concerns was the entrance. Well, apparently the entrance, there's been a fire number issued at that entrance, and it's not for my property. I'm the one that's been maintaining. If the deeds on those lots say that the property owners are to maintain those lots, the road access to those lots until the township takes it into their inventory. Well, the town over the decades has apparently not sold all the lots, and they own about 20% of the lots. So actually, I haven't even sent them a bill for the maintenance I've done on that hill. I've been trying to just be nice. I'm thinking eventually they're going to let me put a lousy little cottage on this 1.5 acre lot. There's actually already a well on the lot next door as well. So again, the water's great. It's a 400 million year old piece of limestone. The water's it's excellent water. So all of these concerns, road access up the hill, check it off. There's already been a fire number issued for a property that doesn't even front on Grey Road 1. So I'd like to ask everybody, did all those report? I never saw the public notice for that fire number application or any of that stuff. So I'm assuming the Planning Act is supposed to be applied fairly, and I've been very patient. Like I said, we're over 10 years in here. I've been through, this is Michael's, I think, my fourth planner, and he's been very nice and understanding. Everybody has, so I can't complain, but this nonsense has got to end. It's a 1.5 acre lot. Andy and Mac have been up there when Mac was Andy's underling. Now Mac's the boss. So like I say, it's a 400 million year old piece of rock. It's an 1.5 acre lot. I want to put a lousy little cottage on there so I can enjoy the view. There's already been a fire number issued for that entrance, so there's no question as to the entrance integrity. And I'm the one that's been maintaining the road, and I haven't sent the town 20% of the bill yet. So I wasn't even gonna mention anything about this fire number nonsense. But if I have to take this to a tribunal, I don't want to do that. So anyway, thanks for listening to me. I'd like some common sense to prevail at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for your comments, sir. Does council have any questions regarding the proposed application?
Just
Yeah.
one if I may, and it's just more just clarification from a comment that we had, I think, a week or two ago through Michael there. What constitutes a complete application coming forth for a public meeting? And I say that because there isn't even a site plan with this one, and it isn't even signed. The copy we have in front of us, there's no signature, there's no sign. So is it a complete application? And really, what are we reviewing? Just the concept of a dwelling? Because we don't see sewage system, we don't see well location, we don't see any of that here.
Thank you through you, Deputy Mayor. This is, I would say this is the minimal that you would want to see for a complete application. The application itself is incomplete, but there is a bit of a history of this matter moving forward, and in trying to resolve the ongoing matters, we made a kind of a, or I suppose I made a decision that probably best to move forward to the formal public hearing process just to get formal comments back to provide to the applicant. It's, as Ms. Berkeley noted, this has been ongoing for some time. And, I've had discussions with the county and the Conservation Authority and my planning colleagues thought in this case, which is, as you know, it is very minimal. It seemed to be the best next course of action to bring this forward, just to receive those formal comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the comments, Sir Michael. Yes, Councillor Day.
Following along those lines of thinking, because I appreciate the long history and frustration expressed, I also feel like I don't have enough information to fully understand the concept, as might people who live close to the property. So will there be a second round of formal notification that the topic is on agendas for those who live nearby?
If I may, through Deputy Mayor. Yes, once we've received some comments from Son Archaeology, we've received comments from the county, comments from Grace Sabo will be forthcoming. Once those comments are fully received and reviewed, I'm certain there will be a laundry list of recommendations going out to the applicant and additional study requirements. As those additional requirements are addressed, we will be coming back with an updated report to council showing the results of those studies and any conclusions or recommendations coming from review agencies. If as a result of those studies, if the application changes dramatically, then we would have to restart the whole public hearing process with additional information that's coming out.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Not seen any. I'll call for a vote on the motion on this decision. And this may help out Councillor Day on this too, that the staff report DEV 2024-058 Z07/24 Barclay public meeting be received for information related to the November 13th public meeting. So this is the first step in many steps ahead. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Winters, Councillor Shouldice, discussion. Not seeing any discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. I'll now call for an adjournment of this hearing. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Shouldice. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. This public meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, Stephen. All right, Philip.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I was just sorry to interrupt there for a second. Is it okay if I make a comment? I just curious.
Sure, you can
as
make
to
a
what
comment.
happened.
Short.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure what happened there. Like, so what are we doing? We're waiting to review stuff we've already reviewed. Like, I know this council hasn't, but are we just waiting for, I guess Mike said the natives to say something? Because Grey County, Andy's already issued the report. I don't need another report from Mac. It's a perfectly flat site. You can confirm that. Michael can confirm the site's more than acceptable for what I'm proposing. And I'd like to, like I say, have some common sense kick in here at some point. Whereas, like I said, there's been a fire number issued for that entrance, and none of this stuff that they're requesting I do was done for that property. So how could that have happened?
Yeah,
Right? I'm just trying to,
so on
Okay.
our end, Stephen, we've done the process on our end here now. We got to follow process. It'll go back to planning and we'll go through that process and we'll go from there. Through Michael, we'll go from there.
excellent. I appreciate your time as well. Thanks so much for
Thanks,
taking the
Stephen.
time to review it. Thanks.
All right, delegation public question period, 7.1 items on the agenda. Any person that wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register at www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 603. We have nothing on that side of things. 7.2 items not on the agenda. Any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda may make a written application to the clerk by the Thursday preceding the meeting they wish to speak at. To register at www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office 519-376-2729, extension 603. Correspondence, we have nil. All right, staff reports. Office of the CAO, CA02 or CAO 2024-035, Georgian Bluffs Vision 2050 and the 2025-2030 strategic plan. Recommendation reads that the view from the top strategic plan 2025 to 2030 as appended to report CAO 2024-035 be approved and that staff be directed to present a bylaw to adopt 2025-2030 strategic plan at a future meeting of council. I need a mover and a seconder. Mayor Carlton, Councillor Day, and I'll turn this over to Niall.
So thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, and good evening. This is one of those times where I get to stand in front of you and present a body of work which has been going on through the course of this year. I am going to start by saying I have been a bit player in this conversation since March of this year. So I get the opportunity to stand in front of you, but there are people sitting behind me and there are many people that are not in this room today who have had a far larger stake in moving this forward. So I think this is an opportunity for reflecting on the success of the staff team overall in helping pull together the strategic plan. So way back at the beginning of, well, in fact, back in 2023, when we were talking about budget 2024, council and staff talked about the need for a strategic plan to lead on from where our last strategic plan ended. When we started this year, and we can move on to the next slide, we started this year with the objective of having a new strategic plan in place. As part of the strategic plan process, we also wanted to cast our eyes a little bit further forward. We're coming up on 25 years old as a township, and so the opportunity to look forward over the next 25 years as to what the next 25 years might look like as a township presented itself well. And so we talked a little bit about a Vision 2050. So since March of this year, we really have rolled up our sleeves and got on as quickly as we possibly can to try and get this done for the end of this year, but in as robust a way as possible to think about what a strategic plan for the township should look like that articulates some of the main key priority areas we want to focus on over the next 5 years, and also what, when we do lift our eyes up, what we're building towards in, say, a 2050 sort of timeline. A lot of the work that has occurred this year has been in the nature of engagement. We're going to talk a little bit about what that engagement did. We have taken some different steps in terms of our engagement this time round, in terms of engaging a statistically valid survey. So whereas most of our surveys done to date have been based on willing participants coming forward, this one, we had some willing participants, but we also phoned around people who were willing or not willing to answer our questions. And so we have done a statistically valid survey, which means we've heard from the audience, which we traditionally wouldn't hear from, which are those that sit in the middle. They're not so fussed. They want to come forward and talk to us. They're not so, they haven't got an issue burning in their back pockets that they need to come and talk to us. It's the average resident. So we have attempted to make steps to talk to the average resident through this work. Based on the feedback we've received through the late spring, early summer, and into the midsummer, we have pulled together the strategic plan which sits before you today. It's a draft. Members of council that sit around the horseshoe have got very early hot off the press versions. We have just a handful of those so that you could look and see what it looks like in terms of a paper copy. But we have now got a draft strategic plan in front of us. We can move on to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the key points in the strategic plan. I'm also going to talk about the journey we took to get there and really pull out some of the key things which are in the package in front of you. So to start with, as we do when we talk about some of these engagement events, I want to talk a little bit about how we generated the information that you see in the package in front of you and how that information then leads into the strategic plan, which is the end point from this. So we started back in March with a summary of the outgoing strategic plan, the successes and the challenges we encountered in that. We had some conversations around the successes that we saw in terms of the projects that are outlined in there. And we also talked about some of the things that we'd like to change as we go forward in terms of structure of strategic plans and so on and so forth. We followed that up with a strategic session where we sat down in a room with council, and I know we've just come off another one of those yesterday. It's been a busy week for council this week, but we had a strategic session where we had that opportunity to sit down. If you remember, in Grey Roots Museum, we covered a whiteboard and countless pieces of post-it note paper in terms of the priorities that council sees across the community, the values that you see that we need to celebrate. And so we had that conversation, which really was the first information gathering step on this. And through that conversation, we also generated a long list of stakeholders and community partners that council identified may be people that are interested in supporting our strategic plan and vision process. Following on from that, there were some one-on-one interviews done with our engagement consultant, the person that came in to help be the impartial eyes and ears of this discussion. So Jody had reached out to members of council and had one-on-one conversations with you in April and early May. We had some staff lunch and learns to engage the staff team here to talk about what the process might look like, what they feel we do well as a township, the challenges that we face in the future years, and what they'd like to see coming through a strategic plan and vision document for the township. Community was obviously a very large stakeholder for us to reach out to, and so we've done that in a number of different ways. And so we had some online engagement efforts as we've done, and I'll come back to some of the other mechanisms we engage with community. But we held 6 community workshops in each one of the community centres and a virtual online one. They had mixed attendance at various different times, but they allowed for some really quite detailed conversations to take place. And I know members of council joined in some of those as well. The online engagement through our Engage GB platform was part of the engagement process we had. And then we did a statistically valid phone survey. So the statistically valid phone survey was run by a statistics company. Oracle Poll were the ones that worked with us on this. And what they do is they basically grab a big phone book. It's no longer the yellow pages. They have a database of cell phones and landlines. They phone people in their homes. It's one of those phone calls that comes in and says, "Hi, I'm calling from Oracle Poll. Would you have 5 minutes to answer some questions?" They ask you your age. They ask you where you live, and then they'll go into the survey. And they kept phoning round until they get a statistically representative sample of the population. So they made 400 phone calls across the township in the early part of the summer. And it's statistically valid mapped back against 2 demographics. So this is, you can go a lot further than just 2 demographics, but this is the first time we've chosen to do this. So the 2 demographics we picked out was make sure we got a statistically representative sample based on gender and age. And so the range of people they spoke to reflect the above 18. It wasn't below 18 because they have to speak to people with in the household, so it was above 18, but we got the gender breakdown and the age breakdown that maps back to the census data. So we know we've heard from a statistically reflective balance of people from the township. I'm afraid that's about as much as I'm going to be able to do in terms of answering the statistical validity of this. You'll see there's a plus and minus a number of times. Oracle Poll have all the details of how they do their survey work on their website if you want to understand a little bit more than that. Our response rate saw more than 90% of the responses come back from full-time permanent residents in the township. We did hear from some people who are seasonal residents as well. And you'll see from the map in the engagement summary, we heard from a fairly well-balanced cross-section across the entire community. That's based on the numbers that they call and try to identify. Again, not that piece of it is not statistically valid. That sort of just happened because of who they were calling and who answered the phone and happened to speak to them. But you'll see that it's a good range across the whole of the township. So once again, statistically valid in terms of gender and age. We can move on to the next slide. So we've had slides similar to this in every single one of the surveys to date, where we give you a good warning about the data that's in front of you and say it is skewed because it's self-selected and self-answered. In this instance, I'm able to say it's not. In this example, we have used an external statistics company to try and validate some of this survey work. It's the first time we've done this. They helped map the questions to make sure the questions were appropriate to be asked. And the conversation they had with the residents is how they filled out. So depending on the talkativeness of the resident, the sort of the time that they would have been taking on the phone was a minimum sort of a time of about 10 minutes to go through the survey. And some people would have taken slightly longer to share their views and opinions. The survey results that form the backbone of this, so 400 responses on the phone are the backbone of this, but we heard from about another 200 different voices outside of that, which are helped to colour in around the outsides of the statistically valid stuff. We can move on to the next slide. So what did we hear? We asked people a range of different questions about their value of the township, the value of being in this area, and the value of the municipality as a service provider in the area. We talked to them a little bit about what brings them here and what inspires them about being in Georgian Bluffs. So some of the things that we heard we do well and that people respond well to. There is an odd one on here because it's not one I've ever seen come onto the top of the list of municipal services that hit it out of the park. But people responded with very positive perceptions of our fire services, very positive reflections on our library services and our police services, which are also obviously our externally contracted services and our service partners. They also expressed a very high degree of satisfaction with winter maintenance. I am going to caveat the fact we did do this survey in summer, and so winter is about far away from people's minds as it's possible to be, but there was a good, strong level of feedback in terms of winter maintenance. We also have come off a couple of fairly mild winters, although there was a fairly large snowstorm in the middle of all of those 2 winters. But we did get good feedback about our level of winter maintenance. And people did also call out how they noted that the township has taken steps towards communication and engagement, which resonated very well with people. So they're the things that sort of perceived to be the strengths of the township. In terms of some of the areas where folks felt we were less strong and there were perhaps some perceived service gaps, no real surprises here. They've indeed been the focus of a large part of our budget conversation yesterday, was around things such as the management and the provision of sidewalks in the township. That's both where they are, because they're in a fairly limited area of the township, and the condition of those sidewalks. The nature of our roads and our bridge infrastructure and some concern around those sorts of areas. The work that the township does in terms of economic development and how we work with businesses and communities to make sure that we're supporting a prosperous community, and our waste collection services. And as I say, I don't think there's any great surprise or shock in terms of that. That's where a lot of our conversation in terms of our budget conversation was. And indeed, it was some of the feedback we heard coming out from our first round of the strategic plan. So we started at this place back in March. So in a way, this is quite nice because it kind of says what we talked about back in our strategic session back in April was very representative and reflective of what community has told us as we've gone back out to them. And indeed is very reflective of the conversations we've had in these chambers over the course of the last couple of years. There was also a desire to see more community activities and events happening. So although we obviously have moved forwards in terms of our community engagement and communications, there was a desire for a little bit more of some of that stuff to happen. We can move on, please. So I'm not going to go through all the details of what you've got in there. I'm just going to pull out a couple of quick highlights in here. So the first one is these two slides. Now, if you look at statistically valid surveys from other municipalities, they generally speaking find that most people are relatively happy with things. I think it is worth noting that we are a little bit higher than I have seen in other ones of these surveys. So 86% of the residents of the township of Georgian Bluffs believe that quality of life here, which is obviously influenced by far more than the municipality, but the quality of life that people can experience in the township is good or excellent. So we find The vast majority of residents think their quality of life is excellent, and another fairly sizable chunk is fair or above, with only a very small number of the population feeling that they have a poor quality of life here. So I think that's something which is to be celebrated. Again, not something I think we'll be overly surprised by, but it's fantastic to see that number being as high as it is. But say that's not influenced only by the municipality. So we asked a little bit of a question about how they feel the municipality's role is within all of that. And again, a great number here, 75% of people felt that the services they were getting from the municipality are good or excellent services, with another chunk in the fair and less than 10% classing our services as poor. So I think a great place to begin. Obviously, some room for manoeuvring and improvement, which is always a good thing. If we were perfect to start with, it would be hard to get better. At least we have some room to grow here, but we start in a really good spot. So if we can move on. I'm going to pull out a few more of the key statistics, the key points that came through from here. So we asked what people particularly loved about being in the township, and there were some self-selected answers, but people were able to pull up their own things as well. So these were the things that came out from those conversations. The reason I pulled this one out particularly is the sheer significance of the fact of what our backdrop means. So the backdrop of Georgian Bay waters, the escarpment, the agricultural land, it really is the natural environment that people are rating really, really high in terms of the quality of life, the thing they love about Georgian Bluffs. When asked what we could improve, what could be improved about Georgian Bluffs, whether it's the municipality or others that play a role in this, again, I think it's important to note that whilst the natural beauty and the escarpment were one of those real strengths, the role of making sure that that is protected both for this generation and for future generations came out very, very strongly. So there was a strong level of support that what needed to happen in Georgian Bluffs was to keep that natural environment protected. When we delved a little bit deeper and we look at some of the others, we get into, and again, picking up on some of the themes that are already starting to come out, the improved maintenance around some of our infrastructure, such as roads, parks, trails, public spaces, and so on and so forth came out, and increased and enhanced opportunities for accessing recreational facilities, community facilities, parks, community centres, and community programming, for example, came out quite highly in terms of what could be improved. Move on to the next slide. If we delve into what roles Georgian Bluffs can play as a municipality in terms of influencing that, so what would our role be in helping to make those changes in the township? Again, three things sort of bubble to the top here. The first priority for folks in terms of what Georgian Bluffs' role should be is focusing on our infrastructure. So making sure our roads are suitable, making sure our sidewalks are in good condition, focusing on our bridges, and making sure our infrastructure is fit for use, and that we've got a range of that. So there was a strong level of support for that. So infrastructure came out strongly at the top. The next ones down that folks talked about was the need for us to be involved in environmental protection and climate action, and supporting economic development and being the best partner we can be in terms of creating a prosperous township with opportunity. Next slide. So when we asked folks to cast their minds forward to 2050, and we asked a challenging question, which is why the unsure creeps up in this word cloud as well, is we said, give us a word which would reflect what you want Georgian Bluffs to be in 2050. Don't think too hard about it, but if you're here in 2050, what do you want it to be? You want your kids to be here in 2050, what do you want it to be? And so we just asked for a word, and we got those words thrown up. The size of the word on this, like in all word clouds, reflects the number of times those words came up. There were words that are not on this word cloud. This reflects the ones which came up the most often. So words like affordable, green, beautiful, sustainable really struck out as coming through from that exercise. We can move on to the next slide. So once we started talking to community, there were some specific stakeholders that we wanted to engage with, and obviously First Nations, the Indigenous community, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, was one of the partners we really wanted to make sure they were aware that we were going through this process and had an opportunity to be involved in. And I've been really, really pleased, and a huge debt of thanks to Chief Najawan and Councillor Norma Toby from the Chippewas and Nawash Council, who have been very active partners in helping staff work through how to reflect and represent and do the right thing in terms of reflecting where we sit within Georgian Bluffs. So as a part of this process, we've had some really good conversations around what our land acknowledgement, or indeed our territorial acknowledgement, should be. And so there was a good conversation, some really good backwards and forwards conversations that we've had over recent months. And so we are recommending as part of this, and you'll see that there is a specific, just like we do for council meetings, we offer a specific land acknowledgement. Within the strategic plan, we have a statement which is embedded within that to reflect the purpose behind that acknowledgement within the strategic plan. But at the bottom end of that, we are suggesting some alternative text to be adopted by council at a later date to form the territorial acknowledgement. And so really what this does, and I'm not going to read it out, we've had an acknowledgement already today, this reflects on the fact that we really are acknowledging the territory within which we sit, rather than just simply the land. So there's a shift in terms of the title from a land acknowledgement to a territorial acknowledgement. The language has been tweaked and changed to reflect less of a historical presence and more of a continuing presence of First Nations communities on the land, and particularly Saugeen Ojibway Nation, Chippewas and Nawash, Chippewas and Saugeen. And so there's a removal of some of the language which was about historical impacts and much more about current and future role of community on the land. And then at the back end of this, we really ground it a little bit further. And this is a progression. This isn't a change really from our old acknowledgement, but this is a progression to really embed ourselves into thinking about the actual treaties which reflect this territory that we sit on. And it's almost a call to action for us to understand a little bit more about what's in each one of those treaties and how they should impact us. So we had a really good conversation. This has been an excellent opportunity for staff and Chippewas and Nawash to connect. And I think both parties are very excited about what the next steps in that relationship should be. This is not the end. This is simply the start. And I think that's one of the things I should say about the entire strategic plan. Strategic plan feels like you got to the end of a process. The reality is you just about got to the starting line. If we can move on to the next slide. I am going to give my voice a rest in a second, but I am going to introduce, this is the vision that was crafted based on the feedback. Visions are supposed to be emotive. They're supposed to cast a picture into your mind. They're supposed to inspire. With the greatest of respect to myself and my colleagues, municipal staff are very good at writing bureau speak. And so not always the great at writing speak, which is emotive and everything else like that. So one of the things we wanted to do when we were developing this plan was look for the partners that are here in community that can perhaps bring some skills and talents to bear. And so for this one, I am delighted to introduce Rebecca Diem. She is the current Poet Laureate for Owen Sound. She is a Georgian Bluffs resident and in fact has deep roots herself stemming back into Georgian Bluffs. And I believe her grandfather is in the audience, a former councillor of Georgian Bluffs as well. So Rebecca, I wonder if you'd do us the great honour of reading your land of life. Sorry, your vision.
I was absolutely honored when Niall approached me about poetifying a strategic plan. Poetry and policy do not seem like natural partners, but I think you'll see that drawing on the immense feedback from the community, we were able to create something that really resonates and reflects the spirit of collaboration with the community and the long history of our residents in this area. I'm so honored to have my grandfather, former councillor Ron McComb, here with us, as well as my grandmother, Marilyn McComb. Hopefully I don't cough on you. I've got a bit of a daycare cold from my Great. Deep roots and sustainable growth. Welcome to Georgian Bluffs, a place of astonishing beauty, carved by glaciers into the Niagara Escarpment and inhabited for thousands of years. Today, the people of Georgian Bluffs enjoy friendly and welcoming communities surrounded by a lush natural landscape, rich soil, famed hiking trails and beaches, and an atmosphere of serenity. The future looks bright from here, with careful stewardship of our resources, events and activities to connect people at every stage of their lives, and economic development supporting local businesses and new investors. An inclusive, diverse, and vibrant community that looks ahead while honoring our shared histories and responsibilities to one another. This is the place we choose to call home, a place where you're welcome to put down deep roots or just stay a while to enjoy the view. This is a place that values sustainable growth, investing in the infrastructure, opportunities, and people who will carry this vision forward. This is Georgian Bluffs, deeply rooted, sustainably growing, and a bright vision for the future of our community.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's great. Thank you. And now you're right. She wasn't way better than you doing that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. We'll roll on. Next slide. Thank you, Rebecca. So where does this end? Where does this lead to? So again, we knew we weren't going to be breaking any molds in terms of a strategic plan. So we have our pillars. In other plans, they might be called objectives or key themes. We have 4 pillars. We've identified 4 pillars based on the feedback that we've received. And I should note this feedback is not just the feedback we've received over the last 6 months. They're the feedback from the conversations we've had over the last 2.5, 3 years around the council horseshoe, and the feedback we've had in numerous other community conversations over that period of time. So the 4 pillars are the pillar of service, infrastructure, opportunity, and people. And we provide a little bit of a context within the strategic plan for what each one of those pillars would be. We came up with those pillars independently based on the feedback we'd got. But coincidentally, they align very neatly with the pillars which are within the Grey County Strategic Plan. And each one of those pillars also dovetails really nicely in with some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which are a global effort to try and bring communities together to address global pressures. So within each one of these pillars, we can move on to the next slide. I think within each one of these pillars, we have a range of actions and activities that have got brief snippets within the document in front of you, but within the more detailed plan that's provided as one of the appendices to the report, you can see some of the things, again, leaning quite heavily on some of the conversations we've had in council chambers that could fall out from those pillars over subsequent years. The activities that fall under each one of those pillars will be council's to decide, and they will be decided as we go through the annual business plan and budget process. So as we go through the business plan and budget setting process, we establish goals and objectives which last over subsequent years. We should be building those in. The intent of the strategic plan is the strategic plan pillars should be with a guiding torchlight or limelight, flashlight for how we're having those conversations. Strategic planning process also gave us a great opportunity to think about how this plan should work, and another opportunity for us to think about the way in which we do business. And so we had a conversation with council at the start of this process around what you saw as key values. These are key values with which we treat each other in our business, the key values within which you treat each other, the values within which staff treat each other, and perhaps more importantly, or most importantly, the values with which we conduct business with residents and community members that deal with the township each and every day. These values were defined by you in the onset, and then they were subsequently refined and honed through 3 workshops, which every single member of staff has participated in disseminating what these values are. So these values are very much driven from the ones that we started that conversation with back in April and resonated through to conversations we had with each and every member of staff in September of this year. The 4 values, these are not just the only values we're going to do. These are the 4 values which were seen as the highest priority for us to focus on through this period of strategic plan is community, service, respect, and integrity. Some of those are really easy ones to think what they will look like: respect and integrity and service. Community is one which really resonates with the fact that we are here to serve community, and how should we do that? So these are the values through which we as a staff team hope to lead our lives and interact with community and each other on a day-to-day basis. And these are the values which we're going to be spending some time delving into a little bit more over the next 12 months to focus on what this looks like in terms of our day-to-day work. It's easy when we looked at the pillars to think about the things that were in those pillars. It was easy when we started breaking out some of the work that might fall under those pillars to think about what some of those projects might look like. When we started doing that, there were some really big gaps. So in no one action do we say deal with climate or deal with environment or manage truth and reconciliation. And the reality of that, focused on, again, the conversations we've had around this table, is there are some things which are bigger than singular actions. We cannot do these things with one step in the right direction. These have to become all pervasive. They have to filter into all work that we do. And so within the strategic plan, we've outlined what we're calling 3 lenses. These are lenses through which we will see the work that we do and that we will hold ourselves accountable to. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging was a strong lens that came through, both from addressing our own staff team, but also addressing the needs of community from an equity perspective and from an inclusion perspective, making sure that we work with all members of community and we seek to address systemic barriers to municipal services that might exist within community. Truth and reconciliation is on a black and white side of things, it's a mandated objective of the municipality. We have a role to play in truth and reconciliation, but I think it's also important, and we have continued to have those conversations around these tables, about how we act as better partners and how we make our land acknowledgement, now territorial acknowledgement, live and breathe in the work in which we do. Climate change, we've had many, many conversations around this table, and climate change will fail if we see climate change in its own isolated bucket. It really has to become something we talk about in terms of all work that we do. And so again, climate change as a lens within here. And if we move on to the next slide. So what will this look like rolling out over the next 4 years? If approved and if supported by council, we will be putting this into place and it will start in January. We'll be looking at the budget we've already started having conversations about from a lens in the strategic plan. Indeed, that work has already started, so we're a little way ahead on that one. But this is really setting that strategic direction for us over the next 5 years and that longer term vision. The actions under each pillar will be refined and committed to through your annual business plan. So you're not committing to anything right now and tonight, or indeed in council in a couple of weeks' time. It will remain flexible and fluid to change. The next 5 years will be a period of change. We've got at least one election that will happen in that period, and so there's going to be a shift in council over that period of time. You've got 5 budget cycles to go through. It's very difficult today to say with certainty the issues we're going to be dealing with in 2030. So let's not put ourselves into a hole where we don't know what's going to happen. And so the intent behind the strategic plan is to set those high-level goals and then to make sure that we focus on those each time we come to budget, but being able to be agile and responsive to community pressure over that period of time. So we do include a document which has included many of the actions you already have. It's also included some actions you haven't yet committed to that we've spoken about or we've heard about in various other reports. It's not a document you need to commit to. It's a document which is supposed to be an example of what could fall out from this strategic plan at this point. It's a good opportunity to highlight any things that you think might come out, but there is no pressure to do that tonight or over the next few weeks, because as I say, the work that will be done will be committed to through your budget and business planning cycle each year. We want to make sure that we're keeping our finger on the pulse, and so we're proposing that as we go through the budget process each year, we will refine the goals from the business plan into SMART goals: specific, measurable, actionable, time-bound, and measurable, specific, measurable, achievable, or attainable, realistic and time-bound goals, SMART goals, so that we know when we're achieving stuff and when we're going to be achieving it by. We're able to measure our achievement against those goals over a period of time. But we're also going to introduce some key performance indicators. And again, nothing particularly new here. These words have been around for a long period of time. But the key performance indicators are more operational indicators that we can track on a more frequent basis to just get you a sense of whether we're heading in the right direction, whether we need to tweak business to refocus on some things. And we have identified some KPIs in each one of the pillar areas so that you're able to measure those. We move on. I think, yes, so we're gonna end. I'm gonna leave off talking once again. We had an opportunity to capture some of the stories as we went through this summer. So not only were we able to engage some amazing people in community to help us with the wording, we're also able to engage some amazing people in community in helping put the people behind the stories together. And so we have been able to pull together a little bit of a video. And so I'm going to sit down. I'm going to let the video play. I think I've done enough fill-in to let the video get queued up. And then I'd be more than happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. It's not going to work, we could. It will work, okay.
Georgian Bluff has a lot of activities to do. It's really nature driven, and it's like the community is very nice, very friendly.
We started farm on the lake, and the community, everybody around it, the support structure, the township has actually made us to who we are today.
Every time we are driving up, I feel so relaxed. The air is amazing. I can hear the wind, I can hear the trees talking. It's just amazing, really relaxing.
If you're an outdoor enthusiast, there's never-ending things to do. There's the hiking all over through the escarpment. There's the bay, the water. If you're into water sports or sailing, of course, pickleball is growing fast and it's all over the place right now. So there's lots to do.
What we enjoy the most about Georgian Bluff is having access to the beautiful nature around us, the cultural impact from the First Nations to the local artists.
First off, what I love about the area is the scenery. It's absolutely beautiful. Like, it's right in the name of the municipality, the Bluffs. Everybody looks out for each other, takes care of each other, and just the way locals support locals. So the ability to have a local business and prosper is very apparent here in Georgian Bluffs.
People are more genuine here. People are more sincere. They're kind. They know the word please and thank you. It's the way life used to be. It's more simpler. You feel like you're part of something.
It would be great for Georgian Bluffs to continue to support, nature and the beauty that we have here, and to keep our area clean and beautiful.
For me and my family, Georgian Bluffs means being close to nature. Having the escarpment to hike and the water of Georgian Bay at our doorstep is something that draws us to being part of this community. The family-friendly neighbourhoods, the fact I can connect with my neighbours and see them on the street and say hello, and I know the people I'm seeing each day, is something which for me is something I treasure and my family treasures about being in Georgian Bluffs.
Nice. That's very good. Very well done. All right. Thank you, Niall, for the presentation. Rebecca, thank you for your words there. Before I get any further, thanks, Ron and Marilyn, for coming today, too. I haven't seen you for a bit. Election in a couple of years coming up, Ron, if you want to move back out to the township. I do appreciate you coming. Anyway, thank you for coming. All right, discussion from the council on the presentation for the Vision 2050. Questions? Discussion? Yep, Councillor Day.
Thank you for all your work on this. I was really impressed by the list of groups that you consulted with. It was a very diverse group of organizations. I think I saw daycare in there, to farmers associations, to sports clubs. So that was a wide variety of people that you talked to, and I appreciate this statistical analysis as well. I think I really appreciate all the words and goals and values that are condensed in the strategic plan, and I think the hard part might be implementing them as well as we might hope to, but I look forward to trying to continue that process.
Any further questions? Councillor Warner?
Kathy's call.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Colburn.
Thank you. Sorry, it took me a while to find my unmute button. I just wanted to add my words of thanks to staff. The strategic plans look great. I love the new slogans. byline or tagline, and I also love the new logo. It's clean, it's simple, it's based on our previous one. It's impactful and meaningful, and I just love it. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Colburn. Further comments? Councillor Winters?
If I may, again, it's a great plan. I was impressed. I was reading it. A lot of work went into that. It's great. So just a couple of questions. One is next steps. Is it typical of something like this to come to council? We review it, we have conversations like this, and then we just automatically go to a bylaw for approval? Or does it go into public review and comment, just to say, here's a draft, it's out there for 4 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, before it comes back to council for a bylaw? And there's been a lot of input in there, and I trust everybody's input, and I think it looks good. It's just, it seems to me like it's, here it is today, bang, we're gonna approve it, and I don't know that we've spent as much time getting this way, that we should do it as fast as what's maybe proposed. Just a comment I have. The logo, I like the logo. When I first looked at it, I thought, okay, I have mixed emotions about changing logos in government facilities because there's cost to it. And that is my number one is I don't want to see a lot of costs incurred changing a logo. And I don't have a lot of the history about the original logo, but I know when I was here before, when we started the Come for the View, Stay for the Lifetime, the family of the individual that actually developed the logo came to the council or came to the office and said, you know, love the new tagline. Can I get one of those codes that everybody has? There's some history with the logo that I don't know that leading into a 25-year anniversary is a time to abandon the old logo. It just, to me, that doesn't seem right. When I was interviewed, one of the things I said to the consultant was, Georgian Bluffs really lacks identity. And we've had some identity for a period of time. We've had this logo. And I just, like I said, I like the look of it, but I'm concerned that we're trying to build an identity and changing midstream. Does that change our identity? Is that helping us where we need to get to? So it's just my own comments, but again, it's a great plan. But if you wouldn't mind about the next steps, that is a concern I have.
Yeah, go ahead. So to you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, thank you for the questions. I'll start with the last one and then I'll jump to the first one. So the last question was around the logo. Just for everybody's clarity, I don't imagine there's going to be any significant expense. We're not going out and changing all the logos tomorrow by any stretch of imagination, nor are we getting rid of the existing logo. So the logo that folks see on the backboard of council chambers right now is probably going to be the logo you're going to see on council chambers for a long period of time to come. The intent of the new design suite is to embrace our already emerging brand work that we've been doing over the last few years, with recognizing the colors we're using, the font that we're using, making sure that we have an accessible color palette, an accessible font palette, and an accessible logo for the places where we're using the logo. So things like social media, our Facebook accounts, and some of the product that we put out there in terms of pamphlets and so on and so forth. These are places where we've actually not been using the logo that's on the back wall of council chambers because it has those challenges. So the new logo is very specifically designed as an evolved version of the pictograph. So we're going to be keeping the existing logo. So there's no desire to change this. We're not going out and changing things overnight. So there will be no budget request coming forward for a change in branding. It will be something which evolves over time. And as I say, no desire to remove the existing pictographic logo at this point in time. It's a celebrated part of our history. I personally love it because it's one of the only municipal logos that's out there that celebrates the hoodie. And as we pointed out in some of the conversations we've had, it also appears to celebrate the bum bag or the fanny pack, as I believe it is called over here as well. So I don't think there's any desire to remove the old logo. This is something which is just new for things which weren't perhaps considered as part of our brand when it first came forward. So I hope I put your mind at rest there to some extent. In terms of next steps, the next steps are really up to council, and certainly we could go out. Various different organisations do it in different ways. The organisations I've worked have done in the past, and the way in which I've done this in the past is the way in which we're doing it here, which is because we're just adopting those strategic goals, the actions and activities are actually refined through your budget process and your business process. So the actions that come from this are ones that come out. I hope that you'll appreciate that we've done a really good job of mirroring what we heard from community and the priorities of community without strapping council down to doing very specific things within the strategic plan. And so I'm quite happy for us to go out for a longer period of time to gain some more community feedback. But we've already done quite a lot of that. This is fairly reflective of it. And the specific actions that fall out from this are going to be subject to lots more engagement and community input over time. So our intention was not to do that, but obviously that is at council's discretion.
I'll follow up there, Rick. No, Council Winter, you're good. Thank you. Council Scholes.
Thank you. I'm going to write off of Council Winter's back at this point. I will say just before I get into that, there are many things I like about this. You did a great job of presenting. The video was fantastic. Thank you for coming and speaking tonight. All that was great. I really like that. The strategic plan that you presented sets sort of foundational footsteps forward for where the municipality wants to go into the near future and past that as well. So I appreciate that. I like that it's highlighted key themes like continue to be fiscally responsible. I think that's important. To be community minded, supporting things that are community minded, and that it also was prioritizing environmental stewardship. That's also important as well. What I really didn't like, and this is I like the slogan, deeply rooted, sustainably growing. I think that's beautiful. What I dislike is the logo. I think that really takes away from everything that our municipality is imaged well in that logo. I don't like this logo. When I looked at it initially, and I went, oh, that's White Cloud Island and Cape Cobra in the background. That's what that is. I think that logo is the one I think that I would vote to stay with. The new logo I dislike. I think when I saw that initially, what I thought was we're rebranding. And then my next question is, how much was the logo, how much did that cost to make? And how much is this going to cost us rebranding? Right Choice did that with their new logo. I can't imagine how much that costs, and they haven't been transparent about the cost of that. So tonight, are you able to talk about being fiscally responsible and how much would that rebrand cost us in the future? If we were to put them all over our municipal working fleet, we'd have to replace these, everything on the little, as much as the little logos on the walls. What are we talking here financially?
So, through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, happy to answer that question. So, and thank you, Councillor Winters, for the prompt a couple of months ago to make sure that I put this into this report. So we established a budget of $50,000 to do all the work. We're sitting at about $50,500 by the time we're said and done on the strategic plan, which I hope you agree is as close to being on budget as is possible. And so pulling together everything that you see in front of you, from the statistically valid survey to the redesign work, has been a combination of us in-house and us leaning on external resourcing and bringing in expertise to provide that support where we feel it would be of value. So we're sitting on the budget, and I don't anticipate any additional costs. We will have a small print run that we need to do. We're not planning on thousands of copies of this, but there will be a small print run when it's finalised. But we've essentially got to the end of that process right now. So that's where we sit financially at this point. As I indicated to Councillor Winters, there is no intention to go out for a big rebranding process at this point. So we are not going to be putting in our trucks and replacing the stickers on the trucks. We're not pulling down signs that are out there for our parks, for example. We're not pulling down the plaques that are on the back wall of council chambers. We will move to, as we have over the last couple of years, we've been adopting a new colour suite for our brand. So our brand is much more than just a logo. It's just one part of the brand. We've been moving towards that. And where there is a right opportunity for us to move to that brand in new product, that's where we would be doing it. But there is there's been no discussion, and I would not feel comfortable for exactly the reasons you've just mentioned in us saying, you approve this next Tuesday, let's pull every logo off walls and everything else like that and change them out. The intention behind this is very much that the existing logo stays and will continue to stay. The new logo will sit alongside of it in certain branding areas where it makes more sense for that, for accessibility purposes and so on and so forth. I value your comments, and I hope I've managed to allay your fears.
Thanks for that. Now, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go back to the logo because I wasn't very clear other than to say I really liked it. Part of being recognizable is having a logo that is simple. And Nike is probably the best example of that. Our current logo is very busy, and that makes it less recognizable. And not to get into, the nitty-gritty of all of this, but it is important when we talk about our values being inclusion and equality and diversity, that we don't have a logo that shows one sex who's an able-bodied person and doesn't represent a good cross-section of our population. So we can't talk about values on one hand and then put a logo up there that shows a young male out hiking and completely able-bodied. So I do think we need to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Coburn. Councillor Thompson.
Well, I'm reflecting on what Councillor Coburn said, and I don't know what I had to. I started this feeling one way, but then I got totally confused. And I appreciate what Niall said. I do not need to hear Niall say anymore that we're not going to change the logos on anything. But so now I'm finding myself a little bit confused though, because we have one logo that's existing, but we have a new logo. But we have assurance that we're not putting the new logo on anything, but we're going to put the new logo near the old one sometimes. So I think we should probably, I don't know how people will wrap their head around that, because I'm confused now too, but I don't know. I think we should probably have another consideration about the logo. I think this strat plan had a lot of work done. I think that the video was really good, and I suppose I am a bit biased because I think about the families of Georgian Bluffs, or the families of former Sarawak, Keppel, and Derby, and think of our rich agricultural heritage. So I'm probably a little biased because I don't know that I saw that reflected in the interviews or the work, but I think it's really, really well done, and I think it sets us up really well for the future. So the comments about the logo, I think we need to maybe have some more conversation about that, just to get comfortable, but I don't want that to take away from the work that's been done and the really great product that we have. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Comment there now?
I can throw through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. I'll throw a very quick comment, and I won't repeat myself, Councillor Thompson. But when I say both logos will continue to exist, I think it's the right logo in the right application. So if you actually look at a lot of the stuff we do, we don't use the existing logo at all. So if you go to our website, our logo is tucked away right at the very bottom corner of that website. It's not up front and center. If you look at the tent we take to community events, our logo is not on that. If you look at the product that we've been producing for the last couple of years, in terms of some of the brochures and the pamphlets we've done, our logo has not been used on those. And that largely does come back to that accessibility piece. So I think where you will see the new logo appear is in trying to carry that brand over a lot of those new pieces. It's not touching the old pieces. And I'm not saying that we won't change the logos out on the truck, but that will happen at another time. And I'm not entirely sure we'll change the logo out on the truck. We'll wait and see what will happen. But I think what I'm trying to say is, I don't think you're ever going to see the two logos sitting next to each other. It will be the right logo in the right application, depending on the marketing of that particular piece of information going out. I hope that provides a little bit of clarity. You will also notice within the action plan, we actually have to develop a branding strategy and a communication strategy. And I think as we bring those forward over coming years, that those will be pieces where you'll see it far more clearly articulated how we're going to brand and how we're going to talk about the township going forward in a policy-based context. So there is certainly a lot more work to be done in terms of that, and you'll see that coming over future years.
Thanks a lot for that. Councillor Day.
I almost hesitate to ask because I feel like we're focusing so much on the logo and there's so much else involved in this strategic plan. I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more deeply accessibility in logos. Is that about vision, where there's colors and the quantity of information in a small area?
You can take that.
Did you want to? I will turn the floor over to
The
you.
accessibility piece. So in terms of graphic design, there are several best practices in terms of accessibility and ALDA compliance. Color contrast is certainly a big part of it. So having colors that you can differentiate between foreground and background and outlines and filled in. And the more detailed an illustration is, the more difficult it can be to discern that. So as someone who wears glasses, if I were to squint up at our current logo on the back wall there, it's a little bit difficult to pick out all those detailed pieces because that blue, that green, they're overlaying each other in these multiple tiers, and it makes it difficult for those visual elements to be picked out. Another big piece of the logos is the fonts. So there's a lot of AOD compliance rules around fonts. And so the cursive fonts and the serif fonts, which are what we use on our both on the current logos that you'll see actually up on the wall behind you, are considered less accessible than a sans serif font. So the serifs are the little ticks that you see at the corners of letters. And so serif fonts with those little ticks are less readable than sans serif fonts. And of course, cursive text, which we have in our Come for the View, Stay for a Lifetime tagline, the cursive text makes that really difficult to read. And there's some current issues with that current design as well, where the words kind of the letters bleed into each other, and it's less distinguishable. So by moving to a more clear and simple design and adjusting the fonts so that they meet those ADA compliance legislation, we have a more visually readable logo. And I just want to add as well that, you know, we talk a lot about this for AODA compliance, but really the communication regulations for AODA compliance are not just for people with disabilities. They're good rules for everybody, you know, for people who wear glasses, for seniors, for neurodivergent people. Those rules help all of us in our ability to read and take in and remember information. So just because it's AODA compliant, it's not just for people with disabilities, it's good practice for just communications in general.
Follow up?
No, I felt like there was a background in there that I had some guesses about, and I appreciate the confirmation in that there's a purpose to the simplified version of the logo. I do think logos and branding is something that might, and I could someday might involve a bigger conversation, and not tonight, but that answered my question for now.
Your own.
Thank you. And thank you for this whole package. I think it's great. I will speak to the logo because that was my former life, was dealing with logos and printing and embroidery and such. When I look at the old logo, the original, I see the history of the township, but it's so complex. Unless you want to do a patch like this, you cannot embroider or print that on anything. This one, I see aspects of that logo in it with the colors, the simplicity, and it would be an easier one to recreate on a garment. Like right now, any of our clothing that anyone is wearing only has lettering. There's no logoing to it. This would allow a logo to be there to tie it together, to put something there. And I like the simplicity of it. So I think it will lend itself, and again, with that deeply rooted, sustainably growing, that I think reflects what we want to be, what we want to offer to our residents. I think that's what this whole plan does, is offers something to our residents. Here's what we believe in. Here's where we're working forward to the future for you. So I'm just really happy with the whole plan. Well, thank you to staff and everyone that worked on it.
Thanks, Mayor Carlton. Any further questions? Yeah, and I'll just add my thoughts on this too here. When I had my conversation with Niall this afternoon about it, I won't repeat what I said about the logo when I saw it. So again, it's taken a bit of time for me to kind of adapt my way around it. And I really hope, and I know the conversation is, there's a lot of history in this emblem that we've had for a long time. I'm really hoping this can be our crest and we have a new emblem or logo that we can, you know, crest things with. Coming from my work life or whatever too, we kind of have the same thing there. We do have a crest that's the company, but we have different logos that are on the shirts because of the, as Mayor Carlton mentioned, the simplicity to get it on a shirt, right? So again, I'm hoping there's going to be room to be able to amalgamate both those together to make that happen. Again, for us long timers that have been in this community a long time, nobody has this but us. And that's a lot of history for us. And we don't want to see that leave. Once I look at the new logo more and more and more, it's growing on me. I'm starting to see, every time I look at it, I see something a little bit different, but still means Georgian Bluffs. So I think it's a great way to go. It's simple, it's clean, it's for everybody. And that's the part that we got to get to. So that's my 2 cents out there. But any further questions from anybody? Yep, go ahead.
I just would like to highlight, I appreciate the relationship building work with you, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and the potential outcome of that with our change to how our meeting started.
Any further questions? I'm gonna, oh,
I was
Councillor
going to say,
Carson.
just wanted, back to my original question, and I don't think council's addressed it, is do we want to see this come back before Christmas as a bylaw, or do we want to see this come back in January? First council meeting in January, kick off 2025, saying, hey, here's a new plan, let's approve it. First council meeting, gives the public some time to comment. That's the only thing I throw out there, right?
Yep.
It is a great document, there's a lot of staff worker in there, I think it's great. Just for me, I'm struggling with, I don't want to see it forced through, I think we owe the community the opportunity to say, this is what we're doing, this is when we want to do it, send your comments in. I really, for me, that's an important part.
This is to come back next month then for bylaw? Proposed for next, or is it done till January? No, Carly?
It's not specified, it says a future meeting of council.
So last meeting of the year in December would be a council meeting, which would be where we would approve a bylaw, which would then have it in place to start in January, which would give 3-4 weeks for comments. Does that give sufficient time?
I'm wondering
Or
about the first meeting in January.
it's committee of the whole. We wouldn't normally pass a bylaw at a committee of the whole.
Carly?
It's through you, there's only one meeting in January and it is a council meeting.
I stand correct.
Which be, all right, with that said, if we could bring, do we need a motion for that then, Carly, or do we just take that
Through you,
as
the
direction?
motion does not specify a date, it just says a future meeting, so I think that's sufficient.
That gives the ratepayers time to have a look at it. Okay, great. All right, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you. All right, development and infrastructure. Okay, yep. Just bear with us here for 30 seconds. All right, development and infrastructure, 9.2.1, DEV 2024-059, shared building services with the city of Old Sound. Recommendation reads, staff report DEV 2024-059, shared building services with the city of Owen Sound be received for information, and that pending discussion and approval by the city of Owen Sound Council, staff be directed to transition the shared building service pilot program with the city of Owen Sound into a full shared service for the provision of the building services, and the pending discussion and approval of the city of Owen Sound Council, staff be directed to present agreement and corresponding bylaw for the provision of shared building services with the city of Owen Sound as per this report to be reviewed annually. I need a mover and second. Councillor Day, Councillor Thompson. Turn this over to Michael.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Given the size of the report and the amount of information that's contained within it, I thought it best if we go through a bit of a presentation just to summarize the salient points in the report. Next slide, please. Purpose and intent. As Council is aware, in April of this year, we entered into a shared service pilot with City of Owen Sound for the for building services, for building permit review and other services that are typical to a building department. So this report is intended to provide council with an update of that pilot, provide some background as to where we've been over the last couple of years in our building department roller coaster that we've been on, and to provide some recommendations for moving forward with a more longer term shared service. So, next slide. By way of background, it's I always find it's important to understand what any department does. You know, what our typical roles are and how we
where we've come from and where we're going towards. So building services actually provides a range of services to residents. They're primarily focused on ensuring that development in the township is aligned with the Ontario Building Code. So we see that in our typical building permits and our reviews and what have you. But above and beyond that, we also provide services to our informing our property standards bylaw, as well as assisting with our municipal law enforcement officer and what they do. And some municipalities, such as Owen Sound, who have short-term accommodation programs, actually have their building departments do those life safety inspections for the STAs. Historically, our building department has been staffed by a chief building official, a deputy chief building official, and a building services technician. They generally averaged over the last few years, as far as I could find going back in our permit history, approximately 310 to 350 building permits per year. We've had a few years of transition in the building department, and in 2022, our chief building official took on additional works as the operations supervisor, I believe his title was, and that reduced his CBO portion of his work to half of a full-time equivalent employee. In early 2023, our deputy CBO became vacant, and although we tried to fill that position through, I believe, 4 recruitment processes, we weren't able to, and so that position remains vacant. Then, given those sort of limitations to staffing, we entered into a short-term contract with RSM Building Consultants, and we did that to ensure continuity of our building processes. We were able, through the help of RSM, to maintain our review timelines. We were legislated to provide a building permit within 10 to 14 days, 2 weeks after application, providing the application is complete. We're able to complete those. We're also able to complete our inspections, but there was a bit of a communication breakdown in trying to get information from RSM, who is a very large, very successful building consultancy, to our local residences. Then in late 2023, our building technician went on parental leave. And then through late 2023 and into mid 2024, our CBO role became vacant for a personal leave, and the CBO came back for a short time this year and then parted ways. Next slide, please. Continue on, and so then with the staff changes and the loss of township staff, in May of this year, we embarked on a shared services pilot with Owen Sound. And they provide 2 days a week plans examination right now. They do a plans examination, building inspection, and CBO oversight. RSM has been concluding their plans review throughout 2024 and has reduced their inspections, ending their full contract. In fact, just this week is the last week of any inspections done by RSM. So our work with RSM is now concluded. As I noted earlier, since mid-2022, the building department has gone through a very extended period of transition. We've experienced staffing pressures, recruitment challenges, and we've also been implementing new technologies, cloud permit, platform and processes to streamline and find more efficiencies as our staffing challenges have increased. But I should say, despite these challenges, our service delivery and our permit timelines have been able to be maintained. We did run into the consistency of our customer service portfolios during this time, and we've been able to reestablish over the last few months a better consistency with those. We've had help and staff internal to the township and myself, as well as our customer service staff, have really helped to knit things together to provide that consistency between the customer, our residents, and the building officials. Next slide, please. Before I get into this application trends and types and trends, I just wanted to state that it's not just our township that's been experiencing problems with building department staff. It's acute across Ontario. I used to, before coming here, I had two former municipalities that I worked in over the last 10 years, trying to find and retain building inspection personnel was very difficult. There was a lot of, I guess, poaching, stealing, whatever you want to call it, between municipalities. A lot of competition out there for very few people getting into the industry. That's resulted historically. You can see where you have shared services models in Jordan and Grey County, for instance. There's a shared service model that already exists between West Grey and Chatsworth. And for a while, Grey Highlands was also in with that shared services model. And for a number of years, there was a similar shared model between the town of the Blue Mountains and the municipality of Meaford. So when I started to review the shared service model and trying to determine its efficiencies and how well it's working, I thought it was really important to determine whether or not the model would make sense from a financial perspective, but also a customer service perspective. And to help me understand that better, because I'm not a building official, I have lots of history in it, and sometimes I play one on TV. I'm just kidding. That's sometimes, but it's important to understand that how our trends have been shifting over the last few years. So this slide that's in the report and it's popped up here, it shows that the township essentially views three types of building permits. There are simple building permits, a deck, a pool, even a sign or a tent, where it's a very fast review, maybe only 1 or 2 inspections are required, and you can usually pump those out in a couple of hours. Standard building permit applications are what we see a lot more of. If I was building a garage, putting a deck on a house, putting in a bunkie or something like that, they're pretty standard. You have a little more detailed review where you have some detailed plans, maybe a couple of hand-drawn sketches that go with the application. They typically take about 3 inspections to get finished. There's typically like a footing inspection if there's a foundation involved, footing the foundations, the framing, the rough works, and then the final inspections. And then you get into the more complex applications, like an entire house, a brand new build. And so you have complex residential uses, you have agricultural buildings, barns, and accessory buildings, and even commercial and institutional and industrial uses. So you can see in this table that play between simple, standard, and complex applications has varied over the years. And on average, the complex applications are dropping off. And that's, I believe, speaking to other people in the industry, it's a reflection of our economy right now. There aren't as many homes being built. There's not as much investment in new construction. But conversely, we're seeing a lot more renovations and those sort of more standard applications. And the reason I bring this forward is the type of application being reviewed reflects how many hours are put into that application. And if we go to the next slide. When you look at over the last 3 years, 22, 23, and 24, our number of applications have dropped off. but our hours per application have really dropped off. And there's a number of reasons for that. Certainly, we're reviewing less complex applications. We're putting less effort into those applications. But we're also achieving more efficiencies. And in achieving those efficiencies, it's because, as a whole, are using consultants and Owen Sound. Even though we have less staff involved, as a whole, we have more fingers in the pie, essentially. There are more staff through Owen Sound and RSM that are able to complete those reviews. And that then, and they have more expertise. They have a more rounded review, and they're strictly focusing on the reviews. They aren't really into the administration side or anything like that. So, so the next slide. So essentially, what we're seeing is right now, or over 2024, we basically have. Well, let me back up a little bit before I get there. So in 2022, before we started losing staff, we essentially had 2.5 full-time equivalents in the first half of 2022, and that dropped down to 2 full-time equivalents in the second half of 2022 when our chief building official took on the operations supervisor role. And so just in terms of staffing alone, the costs were approximately $250,000. In 2023, we started to see adjustments to make this work. We were down then to one full-time equivalent plus an RSM inspector for the latter half of 2023. Our staffing costs went down, but because we were using RSM, our total building costs went up. And now in 2024, we really have only had a part of our chief building official in 2024. So the bulk of the review for the building services has been undertaken by RSM Consulting and the Owen Sound pilot. And in fact, as of the end of October in 2024, those two entities have reviewed approximately 275 applications, equaling about 1,600 hours in review times. And when you look at the costs of that, it's astronomical. That just in 1 year, our total costs have gone beyond $425,000. And I have to note that the RSM component of that is approximately a little bit over $200,000, and that includes their HST mileage, which is calculated from their homes coming to here to undertake the inspections. When they're here, they use our own vehicles, so that daily mileage doesn't count, but it's still the mileage from their home to here to do that. It includes staffing that's beyond just the building inspector. There's a deputy chief building official, there's a chief building official, there's a plans examiner, there's administrative staff. And then there's also additional work, investigative and building order services that they provided. So all told, it's a very large number. In contrast, so far with the Owen Sound, based on the number of inspections we've seen this far, it's our costs are a little bit over $26,000, including HST and mileage. They provide building inspection, plans examination, and CBO service duties similar to RSM, but it's a small municipal team compared to the large consultancy of RSM. Next slide, please. So focusing a little bit more on the Owen Sound impacts, or the Owen Sound pilot, and those financial impacts. You see that we've been invoiced over the last several months from them. So it's it's pretty easy to pull those fees together. Over the last 5 months so far, it's been total cost of about $23,000. They've averaged about, totaled about 216 hours in all of this, and they've reviewed 127 applications. If you project that out to the end of the year based on the permit activities that we have right now, probably looking somewhere around almost $43,000 on the pilot that we've spent with Owen Sound thus far. Next slide. So what we've done in this slide is, and this, I apologize, this is not in your report. I should have boiled this down a little bit further in the report itself. But when you look at our annual budgeted costs for to provide building services in Georgian Bluffs, we have our typical departmental costs. Those are salary and benefits applied to the building services positions. We have, moving forward, we have our building technician, which we now call development coordinator. So half of her salary is going into that. A third of mine would go into that. We have insurance, we have administration, we have other costs associated with the building department. And those typical costs are, in 2024, $143,700. That's what's budgeted for that. When you add the City of Owen Sound costs, as the pilot is running right now, say it's $50,000, we're looking at about $193,000, so just shy of $200,000 to run a department if we use the Owen Sound pilot. When you compare that to 2022, when we had our own building department in-house, it's about $60,000 less cost to do the shared service model with Owen Sound compared to what it was with Georgian Bluffs in 2022. It's difficult to compare this cost to earlier this year even and 2023 because of the input and the requirements that we needed RSM to help with that and the costs associated with that. So if we were to project this forward, say in 2025, I would anticipate that our overall building department fees or costs should be somewhere around the $200,000 mark. Now that may change because we haven't heard from Owen Sound if they're drastically changing their agreement with us or anything like that. In fact, they're reviewing the applications and taking a report to council or their committee of the whole, just as we are. Next slide, please. So if we were to move forward with that shared service staffing model, what would that look like? There would certainly be Georgian Bluff staff. There would be myself providing some sort of oversight, coordination of that. We would have our development coordinator, who would be full-time with us. Half of her time would be spent on building services. A quarter of her time would be, maybe almost like a third of that would be helping infrastructure services. And then what was left would be helping planning services. So that's why that's broken down as only a half FTE as opposed to a full FTE. But that development coordinator will be here in-house 5 days a week. We'll have the Owen Sound's chief building official and the deputy chief building official, as well as their building inspector. Because it's a shared service, we get half of their time, 2.5 days a week. The deputy chief building official or the inspector have promised to, and this would be in an agreement, to spend at least one morning per week here. And they would also spend more time here if required. In our discussions with them, what they have noted is that their building permit activity, just like ours and other municipalities, has really dropped off. So they're kind of looking at it as right now, let's say it's a 50-50 split. If suddenly we get a new development in, they may need to spend more time with us, or if they get a new development, maybe then it's less time with us, more time focusing on Owen Sound. If development activity really ramps up across everywhere, then there would be provisions in the agreement to bring in more staff as needed. So generally speaking, Owen Sound would be dedicating 2.5 days per week to Georgian Bluffs. And when Owen Sound staff are here, they will look and feel just like Georgian Bluffs staff. They will be using our Georgian Bluffs building vehicle. They will be wearing Georgian Bluffs building department apparel, our jackets, baseball caps. They will have Georgian Bluffs business cards and dedicated cell phones and tablets, so that if I'm a resident of Georgian Bluffs and I want to build a garage and I fire an email off to building@georgianbluffs.ca, it'll respond back through, we will respond back through building@georgianbluffs.ca. So they will be, for all intents and purposes, a Georgian Bluffs building department based on the look and feel of them. Next slide. There are certainly benefits of having shared service models. I've experienced this in other municipalities, and just knowing how we're working with them right now, there's some real nice benefits with the Owen Sound team. First of all, there's an enhanced and consistent Georgian Bluffs focused service delivery. In a shared service model, you have more resources to draw from, and you can pivot those resources as necessary. There's a broader experience with a larger team. Our Georgian Bluffs, the Owen Sound team has more experience with an urban setting, so they're better at more complex reviews than our team was. They have certainly more assistance with STAs, more experience with short-term accommodation inspections than we've had, and they are very good at assisting our municipal law enforcement officers. It's, as I mentioned, it would be with that shared service model, a very more diverse working environment. There's both rural and urban aspects to our shared service model. Owen Sound staff have delight in coming to Georgian Bluffs because they get to get out in the countryside. They really like learning how to inspect septic systems, for instance, and getting that aspect of the inspections that they don't get in Owen Sound. And because of this mixed environment, then it makes it more attractive when you come to recruit people. You can say to them, there's a larger geographic area, there's more diverse permit types, and more opportunities than a smaller building department. The service delivery and costing efficiencies using cloud permit technology, we've already experienced that over since 2021 when it came to play, and now with Owen Sound using it, they're much more adept at cloud permit technologies and all the advantages of having that than certainly I am, and certainly other staff here are. So that's really showing some really nice efficiencies coming up. They will have obviously full use of the Township Building Services vehicle and other equipment. As I mentioned earlier, they already have apparel, and we'll be issuing them cell phones, their own email addresses, and tablets. So when they're here, they will be essentially township staff. And that all, I hope, will provide a more improved customer service and satisfaction piece. Next slide, please. So before I wrap up, the last thing that came into mind was that the reason the shared model is working financially for us is the Owen Sound staff are paid by Owen Sound. So there's the salaries and the additional benefits that go with a salary package are paid by Owen Sound. We're providing approximately almost to half of that for, say, perhaps the chief building official, and then the other staff are a little bit less or more of an hourly rate. But because of that, the fact that they aren't officially our staff, we are using them in the shared service model, there's cost efficiencies that we're realizing in the shared service model. So if we were to transition to a full service model, we would need a formal agreement with Owen Sound, and that agreement would be reviewed annually. We would continue to use the cloud permit system. In fact, cloud permit is set up that it really, in terms of the reviewers, it doesn't care where you're from. If you're the chief building official in Owen Sound or the chief building official for RSM Consultants, you're that role. It doesn't matter where you are. It only matters when you're a resident and you're saying, yeah, my building permit's in Georgian Bluffs, but you could say my building permit's in Owen Sound and you get kicked over that. So the cloud permit system's really good for that sort of thing. We'll also have enhanced support for short-term accommodations and bylaw assistance. So again, if we were to transition to the full service model, the next steps would obviously require your endorsement, first of all. And I also have to mention that there's discussion ongoing with Owen Sound they are bringing a report to their council, their committee of whole, to also talk about the shared services model. And then if there is endorsement on both sides, then I'd be working with my counterparts in Owen Sound to formulate an agreement. And then that agreement would then be brought back again to council for endorsement. And if that agreement is endorsed by all, then we would essentially, for all intents and purposes, just can keep doing what we're doing, but we'll have that more formal shared services model moving forward. That's the end of my presentation. Certainly open to any questions or comments you may have.
Thanks, Michael, for the presentation there. There's a lot of information in there to grasp. I'm going to open up the council here for questions, comments. Councillor Day.
Thank you for the detailed presentation. I do appreciate that in a busy week where there was a lot to do, so make sure we understand all the details. It feels like there are an incredible number of advantages to us going forward with this idea. Are there any risks that we should take into account for or mitigate any downsides that could crop up?
Well, yes, that's actually, Deputy Mayor, that's actually a really good question. There's always risks when you're in a sort of a shared service model, or anything like that. We'd have to make sure, first of all, that our building bylaw aligns with their building bylaw, and that I don't know what it's called, but it's the building bylaw that designates our chief building official or deputy chief building official. Those bylaws would need to be updated so that that we have that legislative impact that's there, that it's supported by bylaw, and that will help if it's challenged. Say we issued a building order and then that went to the courts, we would be able to rely on those building bylaws. Right now, our building bylaw that designates the positions designates Mr. Linthorpe, the chief building official for Owen Sound, as our deputy chief building official. So, and it's still, we haven't updated yet because we don't know what this agreement will look like. But that's something that we'd have to do if we would need that to move forward in any sort of a prosecution or something like that. Another potential risk would be that perhaps costs really start to escalate for whatever reason. And that's where it's important to have an agreement that's reviewed on an annual or semi-annual basis, so that if things start to not work out anymore, we have an ability to get out of that.
Excellent. I do remember that was a recommendation in there to have the annual review. So I appreciate the thinking behind the decision or the recommendation. Sorry.
Any other questions? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair Pringle, and through you to Mr. Bennett. I just wanted to say that I think you did a great job of outlining the data that we need to make the decision, and I think I'm fairly convinced of the benefits. And also, this is reflective of Council's direction to senior staff to find efficiencies in how we deliver services. The comment at our budget meeting yesterday was do more with less, and I think that this is a good example of that. So I appreciate it, and I endorse this recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Coburn. Any questions?
Can't go.
Yes,
In Ontario, having a chief building official is a legal requirement mandated through the Ontario Building Code Act. Is this something that they would support? Is this legally supported? Not the model you're proposing. Is this legally supported?
Not having read the act in its entirety, I can't say, yes, this is what the act says. But I do know from experience and other examples that it is common to have a chief building official shared amongst municipalities. The municipality of West Grey and Chatsworth, for instance, share the chief building official of West Grey, Mr. Shipwreck.
Okay.
Great question. Mayor Carlton.
Just to kind of back that up, at one time when that's all we had was a chief building official, if he had to be off, we had an agreement with Aaron Eldersley where theirs stepped in and for hours and vice versa. So yes, yeah.
Councilor Winters.
Thank you. I guess right off the start, I'm just going to say it out bluntly, is to me, this is a reduction of service. And we've seen a 10% tax increase last year. We're talking a 5 point whatever this year. This is a reduction of service. So my background is in contractors. I sell to contractors. I deal with contractors on a regular basis. I deal with all of Grey, Bruce, Huron, and Simcoe counties. Georgian Bluffs is not listed as one of the top destinations to work in or get approvals from in building permits. You're down below Meaford, which isn't a great stepping stone. Time is money in the construction industry. And as consumers, when you wait for inspections, you pay money. In a septic installation, if I have to float a machine in, I have to do preparation, I have to wait 2 days for somebody to come and inspect. I'm floating in, I'm floating out. The consumer pays for that. Nothing is free. So I did last week, I started going around some of my customers and saying, listen, here's what's on the table, here's what's on the agenda. What do you think? And I said, no. 2.5 days a week of an inspection, weather dependent. Construction is weather dependent. When you schedule 2.5 days a week, you can't predict the weather. So it's a reduction of service. I appreciate you didn't compare 2023 and 2024 data. That was totally mismanaged. The costs were out of control. It is what it is. The estimated cost for 2024, you estimate $50,000 for City of Lone Sound. However, the City of Lone Sound only came in May. There's 4 months worth of data there that isn't there. So the $60,000 in savings that's projected in your slide, I don't believe is accurate. I think it's skewed a little bit. And I don't want council to sit here today and look at that and go, it's strictly dollar generated. It's strictly dollar generated. We are mandated to offer a building inspector, chief building official, whether that's by shared service or not, we're mandated to do that. We offer to our ratepayers, our customers, our consumers, service and a service level that is adequately that addresses timing and keeps costs controlled. It's a huge, and you get a benefit of construction when construction is done in good weather. If you start construction, you have to wait a day or two for an inspection. There's a rainstorm, there's a windstorm. Construction is affected by that. This is a reduction of service. We went from 2 full-time building officials over the course of time, 2.5, to now we're talking part-time building official in Georgian Bluffs. Interest rates have dropped significantly over the last little bit. In the last month to 6 weeks, I have seen more applications for new homes come across my desk for design work than I saw most of the summer. There's still another projected 1% increase reduction by the end of January. I know of projects in Owen Sound that have been sitting on the books for 3-4 years because of interest rates, private development. They're back on my desk today. They've got spring starts. The construction activity, let's not look at 2022 as our data and our baseline. The construction activity is changing. And I'm not supporting, politics on higher levels. Let's build faster. Let's get things moving. Every one of us sits here and talks about affordable housing. And yet here we are looking at a reduction of inspections, which is going to add to the cost of construction. That doesn't mean affordable housing, right? Affordable housing in my mind starts at the municipal level. And here we are talking about this. In May, if we look back at the videos, you will see where I said, I agree with Owen Sound as a stopgap measure and an assistance. Totally great idea. Keep the building official ad posted. Never done. We've never advertised since May for a building official. We still currently don't. What I really don't like is, and I have to say it politely and where it's open, transparent, is this decision feels like it was made 2 months ago without council's approval or conversations. I started getting conversations, confirmations from my customers coming to see me that RSM's on the way out, City of Owen Sound's taking over full time. It just doesn't feel like it was set up, that it was an open, transparent council decision. Again, I'm going to say, in my mind, this is a reduction of services. Building officials, building inspections are cost recovery. If we have to up the price for a building permit, so be it, to get what we need. But I believe there is a need for full time. If I want to build a deck, and I drive up here on my holidays and I come in and say, I need to talk to somebody about a deck. Sorry, they only work Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's Wednesday. SOL. That is not customer service. That is not what I think Georgian Bluff stands behind. That's not what we're trying to do. Short-term accommodations, in my mind, is a huge issue coming forward. It's a new inaugural program that we're doing. Let's rely on somebody else. It doesn't sit well with me. I'm sorry, but those are my thoughts.
Thanks for your comments, sir. Council Winters. Reply there, Michael Atala. Response?
Through Deputy Mayor. And Councilor Winters is correct. In having a reduced service where it's 2.5 days a week, it does limit our building inspections. Right now, our building inspection program is Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And he's correct. We do get calls where, well, it's Tuesday. I have concrete coming tomorrow morning. I need this footing done now. And that the Owen Sound staff do try to accommodate that. But again, I can't argue. It is not the same as having a full-time staff complement. In saying that, it's this shared service model, I think, is a reflection of the environment that we're in right now, where it's so difficult to recruit. And again, Councilor Winslow is correct. We haven't tried to recruit lately because we've had this fluctuation, this turmoil in the building department. And if under a shared service model we end up where we need more staff, then that's something that we would do. Or if it comes to the point where it's just so busy that we do need a full department in months or years to come, then that's what we would have to look at.
Great comments. Yeah, Rick.
I think the one comment I would make, I don't see this as being a decreased service, because I don't think when we had a fully staffed building department that they went out and did inspections every day. I think they chose, and this was a complaint that I often heard a couple of years ago, was that people phoned for an inspection and were told, no, we only do those certain days, and they had to wait. So it wasn't a different situation. I think things have changed, and I think this agreement is going to allow for even more change. I see the benefits to going this route and working with Owen Sound. And if it gets to the point that building permits are up and we all need more, then I think Owen Sound actually has a better chance of recruiting additional staff than we do. just because of the dynamics. And as you said, a larger area, more complex, more interesting, more to learn, more chance for somebody starting at the bottom and being able to work their way up and gain that mentoring ability. So I do see the advantage to doing this. And I also see the advantage of having it on a 6-month, 1 year, let's take a look at it again. If it's not working, I think we can react reasonably quickly. And I think that would be of value. So yeah, I do support this. I think it's well worth looking at.
Excellent comments. Any further comments?
All I would say to that is, everybody has their own opinion. We assume that Owen Sound will always be staffed, right? We're putting all our eggs in one basket again. And I think the shared service agreement on a let's cover each other, let's work together is a great idea. Don't get me wrong, but you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And it's a competitive market. It is. Nobody's going to defy that, no matter where you're at and what trade you're in or what area of expertise. You're putting all your eggs in one basket and you reduce customer service. You 100% have. It's going to snow in the next 2 weeks, 1 week, 3 weeks. You want to be building a house right now, waiting on inspection? Well, it's -4 last night. You couldn't get an inspection for footings for frost. You've opened up your septic system. You're paying $30,000, $40,000. You got it prepared. You're waiting for a subgrade inspection. It rains, smears all of that. You bring in $40,000 worth of sand. You didn't get the quality of what you thought you were getting. It goes on and on and on. And again, affordable housing starts at municipal level. I'm not here to reduce service levels. And to me, that's what we're doing.
Follow up there, Michael. All right, so so for my, this is a tough one, right? We've talked about wanting to have shared services for 3 years now, 2 years now since we've been back in together. And I look at it right now as the fact that we don't have anybody, and we need somebody. And if we can have an agreement with Owen Sound to get us through the times that we need them, it may not be. I'm not a building specialist. It may not be ideal, but it's what we have today. It's what we have available. The other part that I like about it is, and we can go back and look at this in a year's time, and if we don't like it, we can opt out of it. Maybe Owen Sound's going to come back and tell something totally. It could be all over tomorrow. Once Owen Sound has their meeting and says, not doing it, right? So there's that avenue there too. So I guess I want to move forward with it. I'd like to see it happen. We are doing our part, trying to be a good neighbor, to use our services together, to get what we need for today. Because today we have nothing. A year from now, if we've got to go back out and relook at this and look again on our own to get somebody, I'd love nothing more too to have our own people. You always want that. But you have to be able to get them too. So it is a catch-22. There's a ton of stuff to happen here yet before this even happens anyway, but I believe that we should move forward with it ourselves just to see where it does go. Who knows where it's going to end? It ain't going to land just yet. So, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. So I'm curious about where we're going. Like, is our recommendation that we are negotiating or reaching out to Owen Sound to talk about an agreement, or that we are extending the agreement? Like, what is our, that's my first question. And my next question is, so when we say we'd like to have our own, or if all things were equal, we'd like to have our own. Do we feel like we've exhausted that? I think there's two questions there.
Through Deputy Mayor. So currently we have an agreement with the City of Owen Sound for a shared services pilot. And that agreement, it has a life to it. Like has an expiration date. I can't remember exactly what that is. I think it was essentially to the end of this year. December of this year. So in our discussions with my counterpart, Pam Coulter, the Director of Development in Owen Sound, we have, this agreement works, but it is going to end. And do we want to continue this agreement moving forward? That's kind of the next of the discussions that we've had. And So in saying that, if we were to move forward, the agreement may change. I don't, we have that draft agreement that we've looked at in terms of changing dates, providing more staff resources in-house here, providing that half day essentially of more people coming in, having a building inspector physically in the office a half day a week, and also fine tuning how the Owen Sound building inspectors would work and function when they're in with the municipality, using our cell phones, using our emails, and that sort of thing. So that's and I put those in the agreement with the help of our HR coordinator, and provided that agreement to Owen Sound. They still haven't provided all their responses back. They're still looking at it. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're waiting to see what Owen Sound will say about all of this, and then move forward from there. The second question about, do we need to recruit? Do we need to if the economy does improve, and I certainly, as Councillor Winters alluded to, I certainly hope it does. If we need to recruit, how does that work under a shared service model? Do we have our own? Do we still then have our own staff in-house, and we still use Owen Sound, or not? We don't know those answers yet because we don't know what the economy is going to look like. And that's also part of the agreement is if we do recruit staff, is it Owen Sound just recruiting the staff and we're just using them, or is it more of a shared recruitment model? Those are some of the things that we need to still flush out in the agreement. But the intent of tonight's report is to essentially get your input as do we even want to continue the agreement.
Thanks for that. Councillor Scholz.
Well, I'm having a tough time wrapping my mind around this. You used the words parted ways for our last CBO earlier tonight when you started your presentation. It was our last CBO parted ways. When did that happen? And from the minute he left, why was that not advertised for?
That occurred in, was it September? September, I can't remember the exact date. And we didn't advertise immediately. I think because of everything with the RSM agreements, we had the sound agreement, it was in such a state of flux that we're like in the middle of a windstorm. We really didn't know the next step that we should take. And this is part of that process.
Yep, Carl.
So maybe in answer to part of that question, there was an email sent out by the CAO and all of council saying that our former chief building official had left. I think part of what we're into is we're not the only ones having trouble finding a chief building official. That's been an issue for a lot of municipalities across Ontario for the last year or two. So getting qualified staff to come and work for any municipality when they don't exist, I think it comes down to this being, and maybe it's only an interim solution for us, but it is at least a solution because we have tried recruiting and haven't gotten anywhere with that. So I think it makes sense to go forward with this to make sure that we are covered. And we take the next 6 months to a year to keep monitoring it.
Thanks for that. Councillor Winters.
Just to clarity, I'm not opposed to an interim solution. The township has to do something. But we cannot sit here and look at each other and say, we cannot find anybody. We're having trouble recruiting. We haven't tried since May. 9 months have gone by. Times have changed. The world has changed. People's mindset have changed. There's got to be somebody that lives in downtown Toronto says, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be up here in Georgian Bluffs, where we're deeply rooted and sustainably growing. I want the crisp air and the blue waters. We haven't looked since May, so we cannot sit here and tell our ratepayers we've exhausted all our options. We haven't looked. I can't sit here and listen to that. We have not looked. We have not advertised. Yes, the market is tough everywhere. But this should be a stopgap. We need it as a backup. I'm not suggesting 2 building inspectors, 1 full-time CBO, assistance with Owen Sound. So Owen Sound carrying on until we can find somebody. But if we're not looking, we're not trying. This is not a stopgap. This is full-time, and this is what I'm opposed to.
Good comments. Any further comments?
That's sort of that's how I'm seeing it. We should have somebody. Georgian Bluff should have CBO. We should be advertising. Even if it's difficult, even if it's trying times, we should have that out there. Somebody may want it. That's how I'm thinking.
Okay, good conversation. Any other comments? So moving forward with the direction that we have, or the recommendation that we have presently, there'll be some direction you've probably gotten out of the conversation we've had today as far as agreements moving forward. We are really receiving this for information. We don't know what Owen Sound's doing yet. So that's really what we're voting on, is that we are receiving this for information, that we are going to move into a conversation, right? No?
No, because the recommendation is to direct staff to pursue an agreement with, sorry to use that Pringle. Yeah, so this recommendation is pending the successful similar discussion at Owen Sound to direct staff to enter into a shared service model. And as Mr. Bennett says, that would be reviewed annually, and it would be nimble and agile to make sure we maintain customer service delivery. But the direction in front of you this evening is to move forward with that shared service.
Carly, yes, Carly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to piggyback on what the CAO has said, this direction does also include direction to bring that agreement back to this council before it's approved.
That's
So
right.
this is not, you're not approving the agreement, you're just approving that further discussion with Owen Sound pending the outcome of their discussion.
Thanks, Carly. That's where I was trying to go. Okay. So any further discussion? Oh, Councillor Thompson.
Well, so that was my second half of the questions. I'm a bit foggy on what we're saying, because we're bringing this forward for information to see if there's interest in moving forward, but we're also saying we're approving securing an agreement with Owen Sound. So I don't know that I have enough information to say it's a good idea. I think financially, are we able to say we have an idea what this is going to be? I still feel like we're at the place where we're still feeling Owen Sound out a bit to some degree, aren't we? Or am I totally missing something in the report?
Through Deputy Mayor, Councillor Thompson is correct a bit. We do not 100% know where Owen Sound's position is on this. They're doing the same thing we are. They're going to their council saying, here's what we would like to do. And we would be finalizing that through an agreement, which will be brought back to council for your approval. And if Owen Sound Council says, no, we don't want to do that agreement we don't want to continue the shared service agreement, then that's as far as we go. Similarly, if this council decides to not share the agreement, that's where we go, and then we look for other avenues. But the direction is right now is we're requesting that council allow us to move forward with Owen Sound to finalize the agreement, and then pending Owen Sound's approval, obviously because it's a joint agreement. If we both agree to a draft agreement, we would then bring that agreement back to our respective councils it's going to generate obviously another report, a recommendation report with the agreement attached, requesting that Mayor and Clerk authorize the agreement.
Yeah, Councillor Thompson.
Well, I think so. So I guess I'll say yes to one of those and no to the other. So I think I'm interested in looking at what an agreement would look like with them, but I'm not interested in entering into an agreement until I see what it looks like for them. So I don't know that I don't know that there's the data here to say it's a good idea or it's a bad idea. I think that We went out yet, so I wonder if we should be doing two things here. Should we be advertising for a chief building official and exploring the potential for a shared services agreement at the same time, and then choose a best of?
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. CAO.
So I might weigh in briefly. At this point in time, we don't see the purpose in doing both. We simply don't have the volume of business right now to justify both. I think it's we go one way or we go the other. Based on the analysis of the work that we've done thus far with Owen Sound, and assuming that the agreement that we get to is broadly in line with the agreement that we have had to date, it's staff's perspective that we can deliver a better service because we have access to an inspector, a plans examiner, a CVO and deputy CVO. That's a skill set we're never going to have here. We still have a member of staff who will be in the office 5 days a week, responding to calls and able to speak to and has building qualifications, that's able to speak with some confidence and support applicants going through the application process. So I want to stress, this is not we don't have staff. We will have staff in this building 5 days a week able to respond to resident inquiries about building permits. So it's staff recommendation at this point in time that assuming an agreement is broadly aligned with the agreement we've been operating on to date, that would deliver a better service to residents at a more efficient price point for the foreseeable future. If, as and when that does no longer be the case, we will continue to review this. We'll have the ability to get out of that agreement and pursue our own avenue at this point in time. We don't see the value, and in fact, it would add some significant cost to do both. So at this point in time, we're seeking a direction to pursue this. We are, I'm going to use Councillor Winter's words, we are kind of putting our eggs in one basket here. It's a bigger basket than the other basket. So we're hedging our bets on that side. We're not saying that's the only way it's ever going to be. But yes, at this point, we're asking to negotiate, and assuming that agreement is broadly aligned with what it is, we think that it has been. We think it would be as effective, efficient, if not more efficient and lower cost to go with the Owen Sound model. Obviously, Owen Sound still has to put that agreement. So to your second point, Councillor Thompson, we are not signing an agreement today. That is still to come back before you. So we still have that agreement to come back. But at this point, we are looking for that direction. Which way to go? Are we going down the shared service route, or are we not going down the shared service route? We think, based on what we've experienced, the shared service route offers significant advantage at this point in time, but may not do in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. And so we want that agileness to be able to respond.
Thanks for that comment. Councillor Thompson, you got a follow-up?
I guess. So what's the significant cost to doing both at the same time?
To you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, doing both at the same time, we'd be incurring the salary costs and we'd be incurring an agreement cost. So in order to move forward with this...
No, sorry, I meant we should be exploring, like, we don't know who's out there. I think we're making a guess that there's no building officials. All right, I think that's what I heard. So the significant cost would be exploring the potential of a shared service relationship with Owen Sound and seeing if there's a building official competition in our future, wouldn't it be? Or am I?
There you go.
So you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, and again, I defer to Michael as well on this one, but if we were to recruit for a CBO, we would do it with the mindset that we will end up with a CBO that will accept a job and we will pay. In order to go forward with pursuing a draft agreement with the City of Owen Sound, in order to support their budget and to support our budget as well, there has to be some understanding there is going to be a cost to that. If we have a CBO and a shared service model, we don't want to go down the route of exploring a shared service model if we're actually then 2 months later going to have that resource in-house. So I think what we're looking for the direction tonight is, do we go down the shared service, or do we look to terminate the shared service and recruit? Doing both would have both. We're not asking for an agreement with Owen Sound to only use a little bit of their time when they have spare time. We're looking for them to basically provide us a service, so we have to have some guarantee that we're going to have work for them to do.
Thanks, yeah, Michael.
And on building on that, if we were to go with a model where we have an in-house chief building official, and then that chief building official relies on the services of Owen Sound, the cost of that model would be higher than the costs of having our own department, because we would have that cost in the shared service model plus the additional wages and benefits of the chief building official. So in this shared service model, one of the reasons why it works is because we don't have those additional staff costs that we would incur if we did have a chief building official. So really what we're looking for is I think, is council comfortable with us pursuing a shared service model at this point? Or is council really of the opinion that we should move things back in-house?
Oh, just hold on. Councilor Thompson, did you have a follow-up question? Okay. Mayor Carlin.
So I guess my question would be, if we were going to pursue a chief building official, that to me would say we're pulling it all back in-house. So then we are adding a deputy chief building official, no? Inspectors, or are we expecting that a chief building official can do everything? So we have a one-person department, which is not what we had in the past with that department.
Through Deputy Mayor. Generally speaking, one building inspector can handle roughly 300 permits a year through plans review and inspections. But that's not all the building department does. Chief building official would be looking at building orders. They'd be doing the administration side of the building department, looking at budgeting and that sort of thing. So having a one person, it's been my experience over the years in managing building departments, that a one person building department doesn't work. You need at least two. You need a chief building official and a deputy chief building official, and then you need administrative support.
Follow-up?
No, I don't think so yet.
Councilor Day.
Just pondering all the possibilities. If we decide to recruit and are unsuccessful and have decided not to pursue the shared services agreement, what options would we have in that scenario? And I think I know the answer already. I just wanted to put it on the floor.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So if we were to go down that scenario where we say we're going to just recruit our own, and Owen Sound does their own thing, then we don't have that shared agreement in place, and we can't recruit. I don't know if I would hope that Owen Sound would say, okay, well, let's look at things again. We would have to find another shared service agreement. If we can't really find anybody, after a while, we're going to run into some major building issues. I don't know what Owen Sound's response to us saying, well, yeah, let's do this agreement, and at the same time, we want to see if we can find somebody. To be honest, I don't really know what their response to that would be.
Councilor Thompson.
This is a tough one. I don't know the right decision to make, and all I have is the data that's in, and I may be mishearing things, but I think I heard it doesn't make sense for us to recruit anybody right now because our volume is lower. But we shouldn't recruit somebody because one wouldn't be enough. And I know there's nuance to the message, but I'm also missing, so what are our fees and what are the applications? So I'm having a hard time seeing the data in front of me that informs the decision to not explore this a bit more. And I don't know. I think we're saying, I think I heard, and please correct me if I'm missing pieces, because it is hard to put all the data together here. I also heard, well, we do have a staff. We'll have a staff in the office 5 days a week to answer calls. So we do have support staff. So if we were recruiting, we'd have a person, but we'd also have support staff. But I think I hear an argument that, well, we couldn't just hire one person because you need support staff. And so this one's a really tricky one for me. And it would be a lot easier if I saw, okay, so we expect to see this many applications, and we would anticipate that if we hired a building official, it's going to cost us this much money. And I think what I heard was, or if we're going to share the service, that with Owen Sound, we know this is going to be our cost. But I don't know if, do we know the cost for Owen Sound? I know we've heard if it's similar or if, but it's, I don't know. I'm having a hard time seeing the data here to push me one way or the other. I like the idea of shared services when it makes sense, but I feel like, and this maybe isn't totally fair, I've been here for 20 years, and the number of staff in our building is so exponentially higher that it's hard to imagine that we're going to eliminate building service, like a building official. I know we need more staff, but I feel like a building official is also one of those staff. So I'm trying not to be difficult, but this is a tough one.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Michael, got a response?
I think maybe. I think if you were to ask me what would be your ultimate ask, like what would be the best? It's always going to be, yes, it's good to have internal staff that run our own department. And that is always the ultimate. But in this situation, in an environment where we're seeing more shared service models occurring, in fact, the planning shared service model was a big thing that's come up lately. And the difficulty, I can only go by what I've seen and heard. We've had a difficult time recruiting in the past, and perhaps that's going to change. Perhaps we will have a better time recruiting. But as it stands right now, the reality is we have a shared service agreement with Owen Sound that's ending in December. We could perhaps say that we extend it for another year or 6 months and see how the market starts to play out. And if the market is increasing, if we're getting more and more building permits coming in, and we see the need to then start to recruit for our own staff, then sure, I think that would be a good thing to do. But I think right now, the reality is we have lower permit volume on the complex applications. We have an existing shared service model, and we've gone through a very tumultuous time in the building services department. And I think I know I owe it to you as council to ensure that our building services is continued to be delivered in a consistent manner. And I think we owe it to our residents to ensure that there's a solid building services presence moving forward.
Thanks, Michael. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Thompson? Okay, Councillor Colburn?
I don't know if I have much more to add or not, other than to say that I don't see not having an in-house building department as not having those services. We're still offering those services. We're just offering them through a different manner. And we do that all the time. We do that with legal counsel. We do that with engineers. We do that with all kinds of different services. So I still feel that it's incumbent upon us to try to deliver the same level of service at a cheaper cost. And I think that's what the selling feature is for me here. We've also had enough time with the pilot project, which is the very purpose of a pilot project, to see how it's working. Our staff seems to be telling us that it is working. And I think we need to move forward with a decision one way or the other based on the motion.
Thanks, Councillor Coburn. Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. I tend to agree with you on that. The one thing I'm wondering, are we overthinking this? We're only being asked to direct staff to proceed with further discussions with the city and come back for the final report, which may give us the information we need to make the determination. And I see Councillor Thompson shaking his head. Do we need to reword the recommendation to make that be more palatable to everybody?
Councillor Thompson.
I think so, and I'm not shaking your head at your opinion. I tend to agree with you, but I've sort of went at it a few times, and I've heard, I think each time, well, let's proceed with extending. We'll extend this, and we'll bring it back for you to sign it. And I think that's what draws the distinction for me is, are we exploring this, or are we extending this pilot to be longer term? If we're exploring this, then it's gathering data for me, and I could get behind it. If we're going for the purpose of extending, if the vote is we're changing this from a pilot to longer term, then I'm gonna no.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. I was going to say something. What am I thinking here? So if we don't do it, like if we turn this down today and go with nothing, we have nothing. So I guess we have something till the end of December, and then we have nothing.
So, to you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, although we have ended our contract with RSM, they are still designated. So our worst case backup scenario is if we went to Owen Sound and said we had a good conversation tonight, the council are not interested in going further forward. We've got until the end of December. We can do what we can do between now and the end of December, which won't be very much, but we can start the ball rolling for sure in building something up. And we have RSM on contract, fully designated and able to operate in the background, ready to go. We do know that those costs will be much higher, so there is obviously a significant pressure on us to move quickly to onboard a CBO and look for that inspector to support. To Councillor Thompson's earlier point, we have an admin already in place, so we do have somebody here.
Councillor Thompson.
Well, so that in lies some of my point. Do we have an idea what this is going to cost?
Michael.
Yes, we have a pretty solid idea that if employing Homestown in a shared service model will provide an overall department cost of right around the $200,000 mark.
Councillor Thompson. Follow up. Yep. Any further questions? I'll call the vote then. We're ready to vote? All the questions are answered? Okay, I'm going to call the vote then.
Can you read the recommendation?
Read the recommendation again, I can. All right, recommendation reads that staff report DEV 2024-059, shared building services with the City of Owen Sound, be received for information, and that pending discussion and approval by the City of Owen Sound Council, staff be directed to transition the shared building service pilot program with the City of Owen Sound into a full shared service for the provision of building services, and that pending discussion and approval by the City of Owen Sound Council, staff be directed to present an agreement and correspondence bylaw for the provisions of shared building services with the City of Owen Sound as per this report to be reviewed annually. I will call the vote. All those in favor? Do I cut this one or not?
Call opposed, and then you get to say.
All right, all those in favor again? All those opposed? Okay, 3 and 3, I'm in favor, so that's carried. All right. All right, moving on, corporate service, do you want to take a break?
Yeah, actually, I have some.
Take a break.
Yeah, let's take recess.
Sorry. Yep. All right, we're back. Corporate Services, 9.3.1 COR 2024-045, awarding of the RFP 2024-14 for surplus scrap metal. Recommendation reads the report COR 2024-045, surplus scrap metal be received, and the staff be directed to enter an agreement with All Ontario Recycling for the sale of surplus scrap metal, machinery, and equipment, and All Ontario Recycling to be responsible for all costs associated with the removal of the surplus scrap metal and related waste materials. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Scholz, Councillor Winters, and I will turn this over to Ryan.
Thank you. So this is a follow-up from the direction that was provided by council last September. Township had stored some metal, equipment and machinery in the event that a proposal was accepted by the Joint Board of Management for the biodigester. That process never went through, and the agreement with the supplier of that was that that would remain the property of the township. So with that has been put up, had been put out for an RFP. The RFP contained a bunch of photos of everything, with there being 2 site visits available for anyone that was interested. Because it was a unique situation and not something that's usually classified on bids and tenders. We did reach out to 10 places that deal in metal recycling in about a 2-hour radius of here. That was to make sure that we got some interest in this. We had 6 proposals received, and they were evaluated based on the criteria. Make sure that they were qualified to be able to remove that equipment, had the appropriate vehicles and machinery, and then once those were evaluated to see if they met the 70th percentile, then we looked at the pricing that was submitted, and based on the combination of the two, staff are recommending that All Ontario Recycling be awarded the agreement, or awarded the RFP to move all that scrap metal. That would include any non-scrap metal that was in there, some plastic piping, things like that that came along with that equipment, and restored the area so it's now neat and tidy, and get rid of the remaining scrap metal that is accumulated down in Derby from culverts and stuff like that. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Brian. Discussion from council? Questions from council? Not seeing any. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thanks, Brian. All right, 9.3.2 COR 2024-046 midterm procedure bylaw update. Recommendation reads the report COR 2024-046 be received and the staff be directed to present an amending bylaw to enact updates to the bylaw 2019-125 procedure bylaw as presented in Schedule A. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Scholz, Carly, would you like to comment?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I know that procedure isn't the most exciting topic we have on the agenda, so I will quickly highlight the changes that I am proposing. So it is a good practice to routinely update your procedure bylaw, and this is something that we in the Clerk's Department monitor throughout meetings during the year. Specifically how many times we're waiving the bylaw, which provisions of the bylaw are being waived, and just generally how the procedure bylaw is working for council. So over the course of the term, as we are now in the middle, I have been keeping tabs on some things that I think we could tweak to improve our meetings. So there's a few technical things in here, including updates to the quorum definition. There's also some changes in the delegation section. So in the delegation section, just at a high level, we are recommending that it be expanded and revised into a public participation section. So this would be on our committee of the whole agendas. And under this section, we would have 3 categories being presentations, delegations on agenda items, and that should actually say public input. So under the presentation section, that's where you'll see things like ceremonial presentations, presentations by individuals or community groups that have a request of council. And you'll also see presentations by consultants or professionals that were engaged by the township to support our work. So that's just a little bit of a change from what we've seen with delegations for items on the agenda and not on the agenda. So the delegations on items on the agenda remains unchanged, but we have changed the registration provisions within this to allow delegates to register up to 5 p.m., so the start of the meeting. So a change behind the scenes that you'll see is the clerk's department engaging with people as they come in and taking a list of anybody who would be interested in participating, and we hope that that would make the process smoother in terms of having to waive the procedure bylaw when a member of the public does approach and they didn't register in advance. So just expanding that registration window to be more generous. Public inquiries, so this is a new section, but in ways much like your delegations for items not on the agenda. So under the public inquiries section, we are proposing that the same registration method be followed, so up until the meeting start time. And these inquiries are more for things that aren't on the agenda, general inquiries that members of the public have, sort of like what you previously knew as the public question period. So on to public hearing procedures. I just wanted to highlight that the biggest change you'll see on your agendas if you approve these amendments is that public hearings, we are recommending that they only occur at council meetings and that the committee of the whole have all 3 of those categories. So on the council agenda, you would see your public hearings and you would see your delegations for items on the agenda. So essentially no new business would be introduced at the council level. All new business would be introduced to committee of the whole, and that is just to uphold the intent of our existing procedure bylaw. So, and that would also make the delegation process a little bit smoother. Right now we have delegates come and they sit in the audience for quite some time before we get through public hearings. So splitting them between the 2 agendas is, we hope, will make the experience better for delegates as well. That's all that I have for delegations section. And then I did want to highlight the changes that I'm proposing to the consent agenda. So we have had a lot of conversation in this room about which things are on the consent agenda now and perhaps changing that going forward. So typically we have the quarterly action tracking reports and informational reports from staff that just have a recommendation to receive for information. So just to remedy those concerns about what's on the consent agenda and what's not, we are recommending that we strike informational reports from the consent agenda and move those informational reports down under a newly revised report section. So staff reports of any kind will no longer be on the consent agenda. You will still see your committee, board, and working group minutes on your consent agenda, resolutions, your Ontario Clean Water Agency system reports, and all correspondence received for inclusion on agendas. So just to segue into that, there is currently correspondence on in 3 places. On the committee of the whole agenda, there's a correspondence section. On the council agenda, there is correspondence within the consent agenda, and then there's correspondence outside the consent agenda. So I'm proposing that we consolidate that all on the consent agenda so that we are adopting all and acknowledging all correspondence that trickles in through the council process through a receive for information motion, and that any actionable items we would then pull from the consent agenda just to streamline how we deal with correspondence. And that is in line with the recently adopted council correspondence policy as well. Sorry if you're bored. I'll try to be quick. So the changes to the report structure as well that I just highlighted briefly. So we did have committee reports and staff reports on the agenda, but I'm proposing that we streamline that and it be a heading called reports. Committee of the whole reports would be underneath that, informational reports from staff and recommendation reports from staff. So you'll just see the a different approach to staff reports. They would be differentiated by a receipt for information recommendation and a recommendation report that would stand alone with its own recommendation. Reconsideration. We did have some feedback from the public on how we deal with reconsideration, so I have captured that in a proposed amendment. So essentially what I've done is add a new section to this portion of the bylaw to clearly stipulate that previous decisions of a previous council are no longer reconsiderations, they are new business. So essentially the intent of a reconsideration is that you as a council were present for the first discussion and you've received new information and you need to reconsider. But if it's a decision of the previous council, you were not part of that initial conversation and therefore it should not be treated as a reconsideration. So I've just tweaked that a little bit to make that a little bit more reasonable. The committee of the whole structure. So in addition to those changes that I've highlighted with the report section and the delegation section, I am recommending that we only include recommendation reports on council agendas. I'm recommending that the committee of the whole agendas only include recommendation reports and that information and committee reports be placed on the council agenda. So you'll see your recommendation reports on committee of the whole and your information reports on the council agenda. So that's consistent with the practice that exists in our bylaw as it stands. We're also proposing a new section be added to the committee of the whole agenda in an attempt to help facilitate more updates from county council committees and local boards coming forward. So those of you that are appointed to external committees and boards, this is a place where you can less formally provide those updates and anything that you think council should be aware of from your work with those external committees. I'm almost getting to the end, I promise. Notice of motion. So we had informally, well, not informally, but under the additions to the agenda section of the existing bylaw, we put a process in place whereby all new items would be given notice for the benefit of the public. So we have employed a process which we call notice of discussion. So notice of discussion is essentially made under notice of motion whereby we would request something to be added to a future agenda. That was built into our bylaw in a less clear way. So I have just tried to streamline that and make it more clear in terms of its interpretation. So it was just a little tweak to the paragraph under the notice of motion section to formalize that process a little bit more and connect it with the applicable sections of the bylaw that already existed. So just to make it slightly easier to interpret. And then last but not least, I have built in a section of this draft proposed bylaw that formalizes the concept of strategic sessions that we have seen over the past few years, including mostly to date with our budget. But we have scheduled sessions in 2025 for fees and charges, levels of service, asset management, and our business plan to inform our work for the year. So we have done these informally and waived the procedure bylaw as a practice because our procedure bylaw doesn't allow for this. So in order to avoid waiving the procedure bylaw going forward to allow us to have those strategic sessions, I've built in a new section that would allow us to move into a strategic session, and it sort of outlines the process for doing so without having to waive the remainder of the procedure bylaw. I know that was a lot, but I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any clarity on the draft bylaw.
Thanks, Carly, for that. There's a lot of changes in there, and hopefully it's for your benefit to help you with your job too and make things easier. So questions from Council? Councillor Day.
A couple of comments and one question. I appreciate that you've taken into consideration and made some ways for it to be easier for the public to participate. I think that's very important. I also appreciate the opportunity for us to be more consistent with how long people are speaking in terms of if they're a professional presenting something that we really need to understand and need more time. So there's some nice clarity in there. My question is for Council and Carly. I'd be happy to hear from anyone. I don't know if that's allowed within how these meetings operate, to be perfectly honest. But just looking at the definition of quorum, I noticed it could go down to 2 people if there were instances of pecuniary interest. And if it was a big decision, to me that feels like a small number of people being in charge of potentially something quite large.
Someone like to respond? Yep, Earl.
So the definition of quorum that you see is actually just the definition from the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So the former definition was not as consistent, and we are, as a municipality and as a council, permitted to go down to 2 people if we had to. But of course, if it is a contentious decision, council always has the ability to defer an item to a different time. So if we were in a situation, not often do we find ourselves in that position, but if we were in that situation where we were, down to 2 members because we had declared conflicts of interest, then there's always a mechanism to defer that business to a future time.
Question, do the 2 people without disclusionary or pecuniary interest make that decision to defer? Or that's the decision of all the folks who are present on council?
I would say that is a decision of those who are eligible to vote on the topic. So that would essentially, in that scenario, be your less than half, but not less than 2. Yes. Less than half plus 1, but not less than 2. It's
The clarity came in though when you had different quorum numbers for committee of adjustment and council meetings, and we always had different numbers, right? So this gives clarity that we can go down to 2 and have her out, I guess. Figure it out.
not an ideal scenario, I agree, particularly if you're making a decision that will impact everybody. So I recognize that 2 is a very small number, but it's simply just the definition from the Act.
Thank you for explaining that more deeply.
Thank you. So just 2 items. One around presentations where you're now asking to have those 7 days in advance of the meeting. What's the reasoning behind that? What's the need for that, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Through you, Chair. So we do require them the Thursday preceding the meeting, which is 6 days in advance. So I'm just asking for an additional day, essentially. And that's because we've shifted agenda review and we've shifted some of the timelines. So the agenda does need to be finalized in advance of agenda review. So it's just that opportunity for us to have the agenda in full and final form. So if we have the presentation on Wednesday, then the agenda is finalized. So it's just a day shift.
And the other item is 30.2. And it's saying every motion as herein provided when duly moved and seconded shall be read by the chair in the precise form in which it was introduced and in which it will be recorded in the minutes. And the question shall then be open for discussion and consideration. So we tend to read the recommendation first before we get a mover and a seconder. So I'm just thinking that one's reading a little backwards because I don't think any of us are going to move or second something without knowing what it is first. Is there a rationale for that one?
Through you, Chair, I think I agree with you in that we read the motion and have it moved and seconded, and that has been our practice, but I'm more than happy to to look at this provision to make it a little bit easier to interpret. And
Yeah, because to me, it reads as if we're getting a mover and a seconder, and then we're reading the recommendation. And I think we want to be putting the recommendation on the floor first, and then getting a mover and seconder.
Sure. Good comments. Any further questions? Yep. What goes Roby's?
Small comment is, I like that there's a designated spot for our committee highlights. I think that's great. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's good. There's been some significant achievements recently within the physician recruitment committee, and I don't know how to go about saying that. So that's a nice spot to do that. I think. That's great. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Councillor Colburn.
Thank you, Chair Pringle, and through you to the clerk. My question is under presentations 2211 at the top of page 13. You have noted that a maximum of 3 presentations per meeting will be allowed. I don't know that I'm particularly clear on the difference between a presentation and a delegation, and that could be part of this. But I'm just wondering, if there are requests for more than 3, how are you going to make that decision? And would you be prioritizing per council decision timelines? Like if a decision was coming up and somebody really wanted to present before the council decision was made, would you be using that as one of the criteria?
Carla.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So when delegation requests come in, we do handle them on a first come, first served basis. So if we had 4 requests and one came in the later half, then we would push that one forward to a future agenda. But you do see instances where there's a staff report and a delegation, or not a delegation, but a presentation by somebody who was engaged in a project. So for example, the green fleet strategy that you had just had at the last, I think it was the last committee of the whole meeting. So those are times when we would specifically schedule some of those, just because they're in conjunction with the staff body of work. But all delegations essentially are handled on a first come, first served basis.
Got it.
Follow-up question? Yep, good. Any further questions? I'm not seeing anything. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, 9.3.3, we're communication, COR 2024-047, communications and social media use policies. Recommendation reads that the communication policy and social media use policies as appended to report COR 2024-047 be approved and establish a consistent strategic approaches for public communication and social media engagement. And next page, that staff be directed to present a bylaw to adopt the policies at a future meeting of council. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Jolies, Mayor Carleton, Haley, this is you.
It's me. I'm going to stretch my legs. Thank you for saving the best for last. It's been a long meeting tonight, so thank you all for your continued attention. I do have some slides. I'm going to try to work through them pretty quickly, but I'll try to pause for questions and comments at a few key spots. And of course, these policies are in draft. We're happy to take any questions or comments that come through in these conversations. So we've drafted some communications and social media use policies. These are policies that are fairly standard across municipal organizations. Thank you. And we're really just looking to formalize what we already have in place. We're not reinventing the wheel here, but we've been, since I started here a couple of years ago, we've been starting to get some good procedures going in terms of how we communicate with the public, and we're just putting some words down on paper to formalize some of that, and putting some additional clarity around roles and responsibilities, both on the staff side and for our elected officials as well. I'm going to start off with the communications policy. I'll go through a few slides. We'll see if we have any questions or comments, and then I'll get into the social media policy as well. Cute dog, get on the platform. So for the communications policy, we're really just trying to emphasize that communications is important to the township and how we function. It's important that we be strategic because it helps us build our reputation and build trust with the public and do that engagement that helps inform council decisions. and that we are making a commitment to the public to provide communications and information in a timely, accurate, and clear manner through various different channels. And so the policies provide that guidance on that coordinated communication, and that it applies to all of our staff as well as all of our elected officials. So some of the general policy requirements that I'm here to be consulted with to provide support to any of our elected officials or members of staff in preparing communication materials and putting out key messages and soliciting public input. I'm here as a resource to assist anyone in that. We have a requirement for consistent logo use, so that gets into some of that logo discussion that we've been having, and consistent use of plain language in all of our communications, and that we're going to comply with the AODA, Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So just kind of big picture, overarching the rest of the law. So then we get into some of the roles and responsibilities. So the roles for myself, I'm here to plan and draft media releases, advisories, etc. I respond to requests from the media to coordinate interviews or to get information to members of the media who might need it. And I'm here to support our senior leadership, our staff, and our elected officials in putting together speaking notes, statements, prepping for media interviews, all of those kinds of things. I'm here to do that. The mayor has a specific role. So the mayor is designated as our official spokesperson for council and for the township. Their role is to clearly communicate council's decisions. That role can be delegated to the deputy mayor or to another member of council should someone else be the right fit, or should the mayor not be available at a certain time. And anytime that the mayor is speaking on their own behalf, sharing their personal opinions, they make it clear that they're speaking on their personal behalf and not on behalf of the township at that time. And the CAO has a similar role in respect to the administration of the township. So the CAO is the spokesperson regarding administrative issues, legal issues, HR issues, those kinds of things. And the CAO is also able to delegate that to other members of the senior leadership team, and they may also ask for comment from other members of staff, just depending on an area of particular expertise. If it's a really technical question about something in our operations department, it may be more appropriate for an operations staff to respond to that, and we would support them in making any kind of response or statement that's needed. So council members, should you get any inquiries from members of the media looking for an official statement from the township, we ask that you do defer that back to the mayor as the official spokesperson. You are always welcome to share your personal opinions. That's part of being a councillor. You're there to represent the members of the public. But the official statements are to come from the mayor as the official spokesperson. And again, you make that clear when you're expressing your personal opinions that you are not speaking on behalf of the township. Senior leadership may also respond to media inquiries that come in related to the day-to-day operations. In an ideal situation, in a big municipality with a big communications team, you would ask that media inquiries would only come through communications. In smaller communities where the media tends to know the senior leadership pretty well, they build relationships over the years. If a member of the media has a technical question for the treasurer on some aspect of the budget, the treasurer is welcome to respond to that. We just ask that if those questions come in, that you notify communications so that we can stay on top of that media message that's going out. And we do ask that all of our staff help identify media stories. I can't be everywhere at once. It's all of our jobs to keep an eye out for things that could be of interest, that could help us share some good news, or that could attract some sort of media attention that we just might want to have a finger on a pulse about. And if you do get, as a member of staff, a media inquiry, a member of the media walks up to you, on the side of your truck, on the side of the road, that rather than trying to take that on yourself, that you can refer that back to the communication specialist to deal with that media inquiry and respond appropriately. So I'm going to take a little pause there because there's quite a bit. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the roles and responsibilities or the general requirements?
I'm not seeing any.
Can we tell if Ryan or Kathy? Yeah, we can.
Go ahead,
Ryan
please.
and Kathy.
Ryan, Kathy, do you have a comment?
I do have a comment. Sorry, I had my hand up, not realizing that you couldn't see me. I think I understand back a slide or so where you are outlining the mayor's role and council members' role, and noting that you use the word shall. I just want to make sure that the intent is not to tie the hands of council members where requests from the media are concerned. So I guess that Haley comes in the wording of the official, what's the wording now? The official position of council. Of course, we are going to get phone calls after issues as council members, and I don't want this policy to be draconian in any way in gagging us. We have heard from our integrity commissioner in the past, last term of council, that it is indeed our role to voice our personal opinions, even when it isn't in agreement with the council decision. And not only is that our right to do so, but it's important for us to do so because the electorate, the citizens, look to us to express our individual points of view. So long, of course, as we're not working to undermine a council decision or be disparaging in any way. So I find the wording maybe a little curt. I just want to understand that the intent is not that when we get a request to respond to the media about an issue that we don't defer all of those to the mayor. And so I hope that's not what it is that you're saying, but it does seem to suggest that.
So that is correct. When speaking again as the spokesperson for official statements from the Township of Georgian Bluffs, that role does lie with the mayor. Of course, on good councils, you will see disagreements. If there weren't any disagreements, you might as well have one person up there and not 7. But what's important is that you express your disagreement in a way that upholds the reputation and the code of conduct that you have as council members, so that you can disagree respectfully, and that even if council makes a decision that is contrary to your personal opinion, that you're still able to explain that decision, communicate that decision, and move the business of the township forward, essentially. So you may be asked about personal things, you may be asked about personal opinions about different issues, particularly if you sit on a certain committee, you might be contacted by a media member about if someone has an interest on something that's going on at that committee. But you just need to be clear if you're sharing your own personal opinion or if you're sharing the official position of the township, because the official position of the township should be expressed by the mayor or the mayor's delegate.
Okay, so then, so when it says defer to the mayor any request from the media for comment on the official position of council, I guess I just find that a little unclear. It makes it sound, and perhaps to a new council member, it may sound like we are not allowed to speak to the media and we're deferring everything to the mayor. So I just wonder if there's a different way of stating that, or if it's just me and I'm confused, then we can leave it as is.
I can look at some maybe alternate wording around that, but most of these policies are fairly consistent in how they express that sort of idea. It's going to depend on the nature of the questions that come in as well. I know many of the people in this room that did attend the media relations training that we held earlier this year, but the recommendation generally is that if you get a request from the media, you take a minute to provide a thoughtful response. Don't feel pressured like you have to answer in the next 5 minutes. And so if you do ever get a media inquiry that you're maybe not entirely sure about, or you're not sure if you're free or comfortable to respond to that, that's also what I'm here for, as well as your CAO. We're here to help provide that support and that consultation for you. So I think there are situations where there might be a bit of nuance in there, but that support is available for council members who need it. Do you have any other questions?
So that, just to kind of, so if you're being asked a township directed question, we should be going through the mayor or yourself.
Yeah.
If it's a personally based question towards you and your own opinion, you can have that conversation. Correct. But being respectful of the township and all that piece of it.
Exactly.
So that's the definition. If it's a direction of the township, that should go to the mayor.
Correct. If someone asks me, what does Georgian Bluffs think about this?
Right.
You can't speak on behalf of Georgian Bluffs, but you can speak on behalf of yourself. If someone asks the mayor what her favorite pizza toppings are, those do not necessarily become the favorite pizza toppings officially for the township of Georgian Bluffs. That is her personal opinion, right?
Yeah.
So it's just differentiating that of when you're speaking just for yourself, on behalf of yourself, and when you're speaking on behalf of the corporation of the township of Georgian Bluffs.
Councillor Day.
I appreciate the sentiment and also wonder, I was just rereading that section of the policy and thinking, as a new member, I may not understand that. I agree that maybe I appreciate your offer to look at some other ways of wording that section to make sure that maybe there's a point C where you are speaking about a council decision and expressing your opinion about it to give some, so that to acknowledge that that circumstance could exist when after a controversial decision is made.
All right, I don't see any further questions or good to go.
So we do include a section on public consultation. It's fairly brief. I think this is something we've spoken to in the strategic plan that we're going to get into it in more depth in future years. But it really highlights that public consultation is important to the decision-making process, that we are going to inform citizens through various channels about their opportunities to participate and have their voice heard. We are committing to providing summaries of that public consultation. We want to make sure that when people give us their thoughts, that those are repeated back and that they feel that those have been considered. And that we're also going to commit to undertaking public consultation whenever we're making a significant change in a service level. That those are instances where we want to make sure that public consultation is done properly. We do speak a little bit to internet and electronic communications. So the website is going to act as the township's main repository for official information that we're going to have available online. Our commitment is to maintain it so that it's up to date and user friendly. It's going to provide some contact information and some feedback mechanisms to connect people in further with the township should they need it. And we're going to use it to host relevant publications that we would like to make available to the public, some of which are legislated and some of which are just for the public's benefit and information. Community events. So we may also help promote events that we're participating in or that are happening in our township, that we're partnered in, or that support our residents, and provided that those events align with our corporate values. And that identifying opportunities for helping promote some of those events doesn't just lie with me. Anybody can bring an event to me and let me know about it, and as long as it meets those kinds of requirements, that it's serving Georgian Bluffs residents, and it aligns with our values, then we can help promote and support those kinds of events. And where necessary, when we do have sponsors, that we will include sponsor logos on our publications as well. Internal communications, again, a very brief section. Section just highlighting that internal communications are very important. They contribute to a positive work environment, and they help support our customer service efforts so that people are able to answer questions that come in from residents. And the responsibility for internal communication lies with all of us. It's not just in my job description or senior leaderships. It's part of everyone's role to communicate with their coworkers and make that a part of our everyday practice. We have included a section on technology and new media. So as we know, technology is kind of rapidly advancing. New social media channels and all kinds of different things are popping up all the time. And we do want to continue to be innovative as technology changes. So we want to take advantage of those new technology opportunities when we can, ensuring that they're accessible and inclusive. And we do recognize that in this community, we need to continue to use the more traditional means of communication. There is at no point when we're going to get everything, entirely online. And we need to recognize that we need to reach out using multiple channels because we have a diverse audience. And using those different channels helps us reach all of the people who call Georgian Bluffs home. And if we are going to bring on some new technology or new media, we're going to do that in consultation with myself, with IT support, and with any other staff supports that might be needed just to make sure we know what we're getting into when we start integrating these new technologies. And we do have some exemptions. So For example, during a state of emergency, these policies fall to the background, and our emergency communications plan, which is part of our emergency management plan, would then come into effect. Questions?
Thanks, Shelley. Good presentation.
I do have more about the social media. I'm just going to pause a little bit to get through the last half of the community.
More questions from you? Not seen any. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Colburn, any questions?
None for me.
None for me.
Okay, carry on.
So onto the social media use policy. Similar standard kind of policy that a lot of municipalities have. We are committing to providing information for contemporary technologies, such as social media. Different ones which may pop up, some of which we already use. And we want to do that thoughtfully. We want to have a little bit of guidance around that and make sure that how we're using social media aligns with our values. And again, this applies to all of our staff and all of our elected officials. So we do have some township social media accounts. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. But those are always going to be supplementary to our website. In terms of our online presence, the website is going to be that main repository. The main role of social media is to have that two-way communications tool, but ultimately to drive people back to the website for some information. The communication specialist is going to be assigned the role of managing and administrating these social media channels. And if the staff member did want to start a new social media channel, some places will have a separate channel for Parks and Recreation or for tourism, something like that. That there's a bit of an approval process. So we'll make sure that if we're opening a social media channel on behalf of the township, we're doing it thoughtfully and we're doing it in a way that aligns with our brand and that we're able to resource and maintain. And again, it specifies those conditions for promoting community events and sharing content. And it again kind of falls around that they serve the population of Georgian Bluffs and that they align with our corporate values. We do luckily not too frequently, but every once in a while, we may need to remove any inappropriate content that gets posted to our channels. This has not come up super frequently for me. Luckily, we have a lovely and respectful community, but it can happen. Social media is sometimes the wild, wild west. So we will take content down, particularly content that has personally identifiable information, so things like names, phone numbers, addresses, political content, anything explicit or graphic, abusive or profane, or anything that perpetuates or promotes discrimination of any kind. We respond during business hours, so between 9 and 4:30, and we'll respond to comments or to private messages within 3 business days. We do sometimes schedule promotional messages outside of those hours, depending on when we'll get the optimal reach to our user base. But we only provide that directed response within business hours. And we don't necessarily respond to every single comment that we receive. If a comment is asking a sincere question, then we will provide an answer. If a post includes maybe some inaccurate or misinformation, then we will want to correct that information. But if we are seeing some comments that are just respectful statements of opinion, whether they are agreeing with something the township is doing, disagreeing, or maybe some residents disagreeing with each other, provided that that is respectful and productive, we're not necessarily going to remove that. We're not necessarily going to respond. Sometimes we're just going to monitor and keep an eye and use that to help inform, our future engagement. Are there any questions on that before I get into the personal social media use part of it?
Let's see, Annie. Councillor Davis.
I don't want to make the meeting no longer than necessary, but I've been mulling over the definition of political, where we're not getting into. Would you mind going back a slide or two? Political content, because so many things become political. So would defending human rights ever be considered would be considered political content, because human rights sometimes become political content in some parts of it?
From my perspective, what I would view as political content would be explicitly political, like specifically supporting a certain party, a certain elected official, or not supporting them. That could be the case also. But it would be related to a specific political movement, political party, or politician. Okay. Thank you for the clarity.
I have a quick question if I may, sorry.
Go for it.
Just in regards to our social media, and I could be wrong, but do we sometimes use that as an avenue to promote our local businesses? And if we do that, sorry, I'll turn my camera on here. If we do that, how are we ensuring that we're not being perceived as showing bias or favoritism towards some businesses over another?
That is a great question. It's something that I've worked for municipal governments where they have disallowed any mention or promotion of any business of any kind under any circumstances. Generally, what I see in smaller municipalities, there's less strict competition between local businesses and fostering economic development, helping promote those businesses and promote our local tourism experiences is really integral to that. So I have seen places where it's something that's much more seriously locked down. For the Township of Georgian Bluffs, I think there's a lot of benefit for us being able to share and promote and support our local businesses and not as much competition. And I think if there was a business who was feeling a little left out, if they got in touch and asked to be included, then they would be included. I think that's really all it would take if someone was feeling feeling a little unseen. So I think at the scale that we're operating at in Georgian Bluffs, I'm not seeing a lot of potential conflict there.
Follow up? Councilor Shoulders.
Quick question, the larger municipalities that you were described, so that they weren't allowed.
Just for exactly everything that Councilor Coburn mentioned, for conflict of interest or being seen to be favoring one business.
Any further questions? So you're good to go.
We're almost done, I promise. So onto the personal social media use part. So generally, we do encourage our staff and our elected officials to follow and support our social media activities. Many of you already do, so thank you so much for that. Anytime that any of us are online on social media, we are essentially in public. You can try to lock down your settings and try to tighten up your followers as much as you can, but essentially anything that you put online can be seen by others, can be screenshotted, can be distributed. You're not really in a private space anytime you're online. So you're expected to kind of adhere to your code of conduct anytime that you're acting online in any capacity. And if you do in your own personal online activities, some people might know, oh, you work at the Township of Georgian Bluffs. Can you answer me this question about township services? There's no expectation that any of us will do that off of our personal social media accounts. We recommend that you refer that back to. That'd be a great question to send to the Township of Georgian Bluffs official account, and then we can respond to it there. And of course, with all of your conduct online being public, you're expected to adhere to the code of conduct, and anything that it does not adhere to the code of conduct, any activity that's inappropriate that gets brought to our attention will be reported to senior leadership. There could be consequences, particularly on the staff member side of things. I think that's the end. So are there any questions about the personal side of things or anything else?
Councilor Day?
Yes, sorry, just a question about the very last sentence. That's standard I find in other professions as well, so no surprises there. I'm curious about the last phrase, senior leadership. The senior leadership team will determine an appropriate course of action. It's very, very open-ended. So I'm guessing that we would be piggybacking off of another policy to have correct courses of action because it's not laid out in more detail here.
Yeah, I think that is deliberate to allow our HR policies to kind of kick in and take over what we thought.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? Not seeing any, I can call the vote then. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, unfinished business, we have none. New business, 11.1, building services. Further to notice provided by Councilor Rick Winters on October the 23rd, 2024, meeting at the Committee of the Whole. I'll turn it over to Rick to address his ask.
think it's kind of a moot point at this point in time. I think you understand my position. I don't know that there's any sense in voting on a motion that was already on the floor.
All right, do you want to withdraw it then? Withdraw the,
Pretty well have to withdraw them then this time, right?
okay,
What an appropriate thing to do.
thank you. All right, notice of motion. Does any member have a notice of motion? Not seeing any. Closed session, we have none. Date of our next meeting is November the 20th of 2024 at 5 p.m. We have committee of the whole, December 4th, 2024 at 5 p.m. If there is no further business, I'll call for an adjournment. Mover and seconder. Mr. Scholz, Councillor Thompson. Any discussion? Want to stay for a little longer?
Yeah. Stay till
8:30, one week later.
No, we've got till 10:30 before we have to make a motion.
All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of adjournment. That is carried. Yep, we are adjourned.